Hello, everybody. Welcome to a active and what's the word I'm looking for? Impossible Wednesday night. No, we're going to make it possible. Matt and I are here to make it possible to actually understand how these movies have unfurled and unfolded, and maybe hopefully in the chat we'll hear your experiences as these films have gone on for 27 years.
Yeah, 96. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Like, you want to talk about feeling your age after a certain point.
Yeah, I mean, I was -1 when the first one hit theaters.
Right.
I remember it so vividly.
Everybody, we are going to be talking about all 7 of these movies tonight. I even told Matt before we got started, it was several hours ago, I was building visuals, and I said, I may have made a mistake. We might have.
You and me both, Michael.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of like, oops. But we are going to talk about all 7 tonight, and I have a little bit of a policy here tonight. So we're going to leave that right there for anybody that jumps into this stream later and anybody that's wondering right now. Matt and I have both seen Mission Impossible 7, which we will discuss toward the end of the stream because we're going in chronological order. But we will be discussing what we saw and how we felt about what we saw for all of these. So just letting you know, there's your warning right down there in the proper font. All right. I did that for you, all of you. So here we go. Oh, man. How are you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm slowly dying in my commitment to a bit. Because there's a heat advisory going on, and I'm wearing 3 layers of a suit because I watched Dead Reckoning Part 2 for the second time yesterday, and I'm like, I got a suit that kind of looks like the one that Tom Cruise wears in the airport sequence. Maybe I should wear that.
We've done the bit, so if you'd like to kind of
I'm probably going to do that.
Yeah,
or else, maybe as I said to Michael before stream, you all may have to posthumously subscribe to me on YouTube.
Right.
Aside from that, doing wonderful.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Now, for everyone who has watched our channel for any length of time, you know of my friendship with Matt from Matt Movie 611. He and I have done a number of videos together. Matt was instrumental and a ton of fun doing the Indiana Jones and the Last Hurrah video with me. And I wanted to bring Matt on tonight because for those of you who don't follow me on Patreon, which is totally fine because, whatever. I told on Patreon last week a story about how after Mission Impossible 2, I didn't go back and see any of these movies. Now, I have seen all of them for this stream. Don't you worry. I didn't walk in here blind. I've seen all of them for the stream, including the latest one. But I had seen 2, didn't like it, and did not return to the franchise. And then Matt was getting excited on his Twitter feed about Dead Reckoning Part 1. And that's when I did the maths, and I was like, it's been over 20 years since I've watched any Mission Impossible movie. I kind of got to get back into the swing of this and figure this out. I got to catch up. So that's what I did while Matt was tweeting these enthusiastic tweets just about how he's kept up with the series.
It's just a normal week for me. I just enthusiastically tweet about Tom Cruise, and Michael goes, oh. But this time, he was like, wait a second, I once liked one of those.
Yeah, I liked one of those movies a lot. I for those of you that didn't hear the story, this is the short version, was in the summer of 1996, I saw Mission Impossible, the original. After I heard it was coming out, saw the trailers, I got really excited, partly because I'm a retro guy at heart, so I knew the old television show. Also, I really like action and espionage films set outside the United States, things like that. So it was kind of firing on all cylinders for me. And I wasn't like a Tom Cruise guy. I was ambivalent. Like I didn't follow Tom Cruise around, it wasn't about that. And as a matter of fact, his career at that time was kind of in a lull. Like this was considered a comeback movie for him as well as Brian.
Yeah, because he was in that period of his career to where he was really making his Oscar run, where he was doing stuff like Rain Man and
Far and Away.
Then Far and Away. Same year he does Mission Impossible. He does Jerry Maguire, which
Jerry Maguire.
The last time he gets nominated.
I think so. Yeah.
I think that was sort of. I think not getting nominated for Magnolia was actually what kind of he was like. You know what? I'm just going to make action movies. And now on, screw it.
I'm an adrenaline junkie.
So many actors just eventually say, screw the Oscars.
Oh, sure.
And rightfully so. Harrison Ford did it, I think, after 1985.
Yeah, he did. He's like, I'll play Jack Ryan and maybe a president on an airplane. And yeah, it'll be great.
Just present your Oscars, I guess, not get one. Fine.
But, so I saw Mission Impossible, the original, on opening day and then consecutively for the next 4 days. So I saw Mission Impossible once a day for 5 days, which sounds crazy, but when you're that into movies like I am and like Matt is, sometimes a movie grabs you and you just have to absorb it.
I think that is something all film fans wish they could do, but few actually do. Like there are movies like to where I'm like, okay, I got to go and see that again. Two in recent years being Top Gun Maverick and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, to where I'm like, I wish I could have. I did go back and see them again in theaters, but I'm like, if I could have gone and seen them 5 days in a row and been totally happy. So the fact you actually did it is commendable.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was my friend Kara and I was going in. That was the summer before my senior year of high school. So we were
your dazed and confused era.
Yeah, exactly. And my friend Kara and I, we both just like thought this was like the greatest movie ever. And we went and we both together saw it 5 times in 5 days. And it just so happened that a few weeks later, our English class was taking a trip to London, and I'd lived there previously. So my English teacher gave me a little bit more leeway. Like she extended the leash on me because I already knew my way around. And she let me just kind of go on these jaunts. And so that summer,
I'm imagining now the Parks and Rec moment to where Ron's in Home Depot. It's just Michael, his teacher in London. She's like, I know more than you.
We don't have this in America. Yeah. And Kara was on that same trip, and we both said, we're going to go to the shooting locations in London where they filmed scenes from Mission Impossible. I went digging through my photo bins yesterday and today. There are photos I wasn't able to find that I'll describe in a minute, but the important ones I found. And we went to Liverpool Station, where they filmed the safe house above the station in the rain, which is right outside where I'm about to show this location. But what we wanted to get to was the newly renovated Liverpool Station interior, where he's on the phone with Kittredge watching the clock to make sure he hangs up before they can trace him. And that's when he realizes that Mr. Phelps is still alive. And we found it. And that's me at the age of like 17 or 18. And there's Kara on the right with me at the exact phone that Tom Cruise had used just a few months prior, filming in that station for the movie. That's how into this movie we were. And the Planet Hollywood in London, that was located at that time at the Trocadero, they had a big like display window that they would re-theme based on whatever big movie was out. And they had I have a picture of it, but I couldn't find it. That I know I have it. She and I sitting in front of the window with the big Mission Impossible logo, and through the window they had an entire recreation with like a waxwork of him on the wires coming down into the room, like to use the computer in the CIA safe house. So it was a big deal. It was a big movie. And it was one that, I really liked. But let's talk a little bit about that first film. When did you finally see the first Mission Impossible?
So yeah, I It had to have been, I think, maybe in the run up to Ghost Protocol or around the time. Because, like I said, when I saw them, there were only 3 available for me to be able to see. I did watch them in order. It's kind of like Lethal Weapon. I made it a point to make sure I see each chronologically. And that movie is kind of like motion picture. I think it's labeled as this weird, boring film Star Trek the motion picture. I literally just said motion picture. That could be anything. It is this like weird, like strange movie. I always liked it. I always enjoyed it. I never thought it was weird. I had never seen the show. I still have actually never seen the show, which is odd given all the things I was watching when I was a kid. Like I lived on TV Land, but I was watching stuff like A-Team and things like that. There were just shows that passed me by. Mission Impossible is one of those. So I've only ever really known the movies. Yeah, I always liked it. I always thought it was an interesting kind of venture, especially when the newer ones were coming out. It really stood out,
right?
Which is strange, but that's a whole conversation we'll get into over this stream.
Oh yeah, because we're gonna I used to think that the second film was sort of like the dark horse of the series, and in many ways it is, and we'll talk about that as well.
It's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. However, in a lot of ways, the original one is also kind of detached from. It's almost like the real mythology of this series and the tone of the series, the bend, the tack of the series starts with 3.
Yeah, because you even brought it up, I think, in your Patreon message, how like it's kind of weird Mission Impossible became a series because it was coming out during that time in the 90s to where they were taking old shows and giving them theatrical, there was Beverly Hillbillies and the Flintstones,
right?
And Brady Bunch and everything. But I think Mission Impossible was like easily probably the most successful, which is why they wanted to make a sequel. And I think even though the reception of that movie was horrible because it made so much money,
right?
That they were like, oh, I guess maybe because like Flintstones got a sequel, but nobody saw that except for like me and my brother on VHS. So they were like, we're not doing any more Flintstones movies. But Mission Impossible, I think because that second movie made so much money that they were like, but I think Tom Cruise and company were still just like, we're not doing that anymore, John. But yeah, 3 is really, I think, the one to where like this sort of Mission Impossible as we know it kind of forms. Yeah,
I think 2 kind of had a because the first one, while some people after they got done watching it back then, I remember some people were like, it was confusing, but I liked it. Whereas the second one, more people came out going, that was just weird. Like they were like, that movie was just weird. And so I think
what's with the doves?
Yeah, right. Which was John Woo's thing, like when you see Hard Boiled and The Killer and stuff. And that was
you've seen Face Off.
Yeah, like John Woo was really popular. His Hong Kong movies had come over to the States through VHS and whatnot at that time, and they were very popular with teenagers my age. We were watching John Woo movies.
And I think Tom Cruise was also a fan, and I think something you'll see with the first 2 is I think the Mission Impossible series was the first time he was ever a producer.
Right.
And I really think he just wanted to work with directors he liked, which is why he had De Palma do the first movie and he had John Woo do the second one.
Yeah.
And there was definitely this sort of conversation of like, and maybe they saw the critiques of like, oh, I don't get what's a knock list and what's all this. And so we're like, what if we just do a more straight up action movie? Than, a spy espionage thriller, even though you're based on a series that was all about being spy and espionage. But sure.
We're going to get into the plots here in a minute, everybody, but I'm so glad you brought that up because so many people say that the later films are less confusing. And I have just watched all of these movies, all right? And I just watched them last week, okay? So I'm sitting down to put the visuals together and get my head in the space for this stream tonight. And I'm going, okay, 4 and 5. What's the nope, wait. 4 is 5 and 5. Nope. Nope.
Yeah,
Like,
they basically all have confusing plots. And having rewatched the first movie recently, kind of not in the lead up of Dead Reckoning, honestly, I rewatched it partially because of what your Patreon message. I was like, I really need to rewatch that. And it is now my favorite because I'm like, this is the only spy espionage thriller of it. And I love a lot of later ones, and we'll definitely talk about it. But I'm like, this is not confusing. This is actually really cool what they did with this, and particularly with where the character of Ethan Hunt is, which is Ryan will talk about. I'm not so interested in kind of how they're retconning his history and Dead Reckoning, because I was like, it's kind of clearly established he was in the military and tried to go to the CIA, but the CIA was like, what if we have this other place for you? But now apparently some woman died. All right, Tom, just you got a part 2 to make it all make sense. Part of me feels like you're not revisiting the first movie, and so you're just gonna forget it. Okay, sure.
Yeah, it's the first movie, and I don't know if I attribute this, or not me personally. I don't know if we collectively can attribute this mostly to De Palma and his skill, or to the fact that it was the first one out of the gate. But when you watch that first movie, despite the fact that it was trying to set the stakes very high that results in the character having to be disavowed, which at that time wasn't the almost in joke that it is now. Like, it was the first movie and it tried to set really high stakes. I do not fault it for what it did, because
I honestly think, with just my base knowledge of the show, I think that was something that, Jim Phelps in every message, that was always a thing, that it's like, oh, if any of your teammates should be captured or something, you'll be disavowed. But I don't really think it happened on the show. So I think that was one of those, because Tom Cruise was a big fan of the show. And I think you see that with Jim Phelps being, a character in the first movie. And I think that was even sort of the like, well, what if one of these characters does get disavowed? What happens? I think that was kind of, which is why I think also that first movie works so well, and why maybe some of the plots of later ones don't. I'm looking at you two.
For those of you that haven't seen it and who are sticking around and don't care about,
me and Mike are about to recite it word for word. Get ready. Pasta lasagna, don't get any on you.
That's right. I picked up what you're putting down. So the plot of this film is, I find, to be pretty straightforward, which is they are on a mission at the very beginning. They are in Prague. They are supposed to stop someone from stealing a CIA list of agents and their real identities from getting out.
Because there's a knock list that has gone out with their false identities. Basically, the IMF is afraid that if someone gets the two halves, they can make a hole and basically know who any of the field agents are.
To know who all the embedded CIA agents are in Europe or the world or whatever. And unfortunately, as it quickly crumbles around them, they start getting offed one by one, and they don't know why. And then Ethan, played by Tom Cruise, realizes that as he's frantically trying to get everybody to abort and run, he's unsuccessful, and everybody gets killed. And he runs off before he gets killed. And then he finds out that the IMF has pegged him as the murderer. They have made him the prime suspect. And he has to now clear his name. And it's some of the best there's a lot of DNA in this movie that I feel, it's a feeling. I could be wrong, but I feel like the guys that made Jason Bourne, the films, watched a little bit of that first Mission Impossible movie.
To be honest, I've never seen a Bourne film, so I can neither confirm nor deny.
You've never seen a Bourne movie?
No.
Oh, I'm not like, you've never seen a Bourne movie. No, I'm just surprised.
Well, that's the exact same thing. But I was like, wow, Michael, you've really never seen a Mission Impossible movie since 2000?
Right. Well,
it happens.
After this is over, I'll send you my recommendations, because you don't need to see all 5. You need to see the first 3. That's it. Like,
that is what I've heard.
Yeah.
And poor Jeremy Renner.
Oh, I know.
The series too. They're just like, you're gonna be somebody, and then it's like, he's like, thank God Marvel happened.
He's the guy that was in this and then kind of got written out, and then he was he's the and then he got run over.
Great as Hawkeye. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, for a little while, and then
well, his show's really good.
No, the show is good. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the fact that he got run over by a snowplow. But
Oh, yeah. Oh, you went to the real world. I was just existing in movie land. Michael had to make it real. That's pretty
I was
huge.
talking about a guy who's so unlucky, like he can't get a break. Like
Michael.
so. Anyway, yeah. But there's a lot of actual espionage DNA in this, and a lot of real tension that's very palpable. This is sorry.
And a
Go ahead.
lot of the opening that is so good is because, which is just a credit to all those actors that they picked. Like, obviously, they read the script, and I'm pretty certain going in, De Palma and the casting director were like, "You don't make it past the first 20 minutes." But like that boardroom scene when Jim Phelps is setting up the mission, like all the jokes they're making with Jim about like, "Oh, where they put you up now, the Radisson," like particularly Ethan and Emilio Estevez, like they just have this great camaraderie, and that's why I really like the opening scenes where they're in the midst of a mission. It shows you how tight this team is, which is why when everyone starts getting killed off, you feel it.
Yes.
Instead of, if they didn't have these opening scenes, I don't think it would be as strong if you just started the movie with everyone just kind of dying. You'd be like, well, I don't know, were these people any that good to begin with? Which, yes, by the way, when I first saw this movie, the only thing I was thinking, just like the first time I saw Breakfast Club, was like, hey, that's Gordon Bombay.
That's the thing. This movie actually establishes how an IMF team works when they're not having to go rogue and do all this crazy stuff. Like this is how an IMF mission generally is supposed to work, with a leader and clear direction, good camaraderie. Everybody has their role, and they're going to carry it out to the letter. They're going to test their equipment. They're going to do all this stuff, and then of course it all goes wrong. It all goes sideways, and then the real tension occurs. And it's not just the story that I think is well crafted. It's also De Palma's skill as a visual filmmaker, because when he starts, when he makes the call to try and come in from the cold, and he talks to Kitteridge, and he says, "Meet me in 1 hour at this restaurant here in Prague. I'll be ready for you with passports," and all that kind of stuff. There's
that moment when Ethan is like, "Wait, sir, you're in Prague?"
Right.
Like, it's almost like that's not right. We were the only team. And again, going back to De Palma just being an incredible director, that moment when Ethan and Sarah are kind of just, Jim has said, like, just abort, and they're trying to just kind of slowly walk away. And Ethan picks up on that drunken couple, and he starts to, realize, he's like, wait a second. And then, of course, when he finds out Kittredge is there, and in that scene, he puts together, like, this was a setup, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, in two different ways. A setup from this mole, and also a setup on IMF.
Yeah, it was a setup to it's revealed in the scene. And look at the cinematography here, where, De Palma ratchets up the tension with these Dutch angles to, like, this is the scene in question where, as the conversation gets more intense, the cinematography and the compositions get more intense.
Yeah.
And you start to really feel for Ethan in that moment. You start to feel your glutes start to tighten up in the seat, as you're watching this. And you find out, because this is where the real spy espionage part of it comes in. There's this moment here, and I wanted to pull it because I didn't want to pull too many clips because Paramount would come after us, but I did edit.
That's why I made this probably the greatest intro to any live stream ever, but we can't use it because it'll be in the special edition in 30 years.
That's right. I just cut together this brief moment just to kind of illustrate. In this movie, he is written as a guy kind of like Bourne, where he's got immense levels of training. And he's in a situation that nobody in their right mind would ever be prepared for. But
and that's the other thing that the other movies lose, is that in this one, Ethan's not the top brass of the team. If anything, he's actually, I think, the newest member of the team.
Right.
He's only a few years out of the army, and you feel that, particularly in this, whole opening of just like, he's always kind of, which is one of my favorite little things, is when they're going through the opening of sort of who the usual team is. If you pause the movie, you actually see, when it's Ethan's kind of like bio, it says training officer Jim Phelps. So he's had this connection to Jim this whole time. And so this is kind of the first time that, because as far as Ethan is concerned, Jim is dead. And so it's like, who do I turn to? And now Kittredge is revealing all this. Like, I really give credit to Tom Cruise and Brian De Palma for just really like the moment when he's just like, what is going on?
Right.
We've all had that moment. I had that moment 20 minutes ago when I put on a 3-piece suit in 80-degree weather. What am I doing?
This moment right here is something that the other films don't have, because we'll talk about it when we get to the other films more, but not so much in 2, but by the time you get to 3, they've created a character in Ethan Hunt where he's not just one step ahead of everybody else. He's like 11 steps ahead of everybody else. And in this movie, he's actually behind the bad guy. He's one step behind, but he's very skilled. He's not incompetent.
He's very, and I have to feel like just because this is 96, he's very Jack Ryan. You know, to where that's in Hunt for October and Patriot Games is like, Jack Ryan is like one of the smartest guys. But there's this like, I'm kind of a step ahead, but I can make a mistake and just fall back. Like, I think that is something that they really set up, which is something, and we'll talk about it starting with the second movie, that you lose because they are like, nah, but what if we just made him the greatest thing ever?
Now watch this, everyone, because the cinematography in this shot, I've compressed it a little bit, but the cinematography in this shot is going to start very standard. And then the moment it visually tells you the heat in the room is being turned up. Like, visually it changes. Watch this.
Why was there another team?
What?
Of IMF agents at the embassy tonight.
I don't quite follow you.
Let's see if you can follow me around the room.
And that right there, where De Palma knows how to do that, that is something that other directors with their own skill and style have come in and done follow-ups to this film. But there's something very unique about this movie, both in the characterization of Ethan Hunt, the way they craft the story, and the way they shoot the story. And it's unique in the pantheon of all 7 films. It's completely unique.
And I think that's what happens when you just get, I mean, by the time De Palma did this, he's done like Carrie and The Untouchables. Like, the guy's just, you know, he's not some fresh face, like out of film school guy. Like, he is a well-established, fantastic filmmaker. And I think that's why it's sad that he never came back to the series. But that's also because him and Cruise butted heads. Like,
did they?
Throughout the but I think that was partially because this was the first time Cruise was a producer and had like more control while also being the main actor.
Right.
And so there was just, and also it's Hollywood. You get 2 people who have 2 gigantic egos.
Sure.
Going to bash their heads. Not everybody can be Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford.
Right.
I just feel like, isn't this fun?
We were talking about doing the stream in the background, and we were talking about the Mission Impossible films for the last week and a half or so. And I remember you said at one point you went back and revisited the first film, and you came back around and you said you sent me like a photo of the CIA computer room that they have to infiltrate to get the knock list.
Yeah.
What happens is that for everybody who's in the chat right now, Ethan knows that the only way to exonerate himself is to figure out who actually was trying to steal the knock.
Yeah, who the real mole is.
Yeah.
And he learns that there's this dealer named Max that whoever the mole was is working with. And so he's like, if I get this and I give it to Max, this is going to lead me to who the actual mole is.
Right. And so he turns around and says,
yeah, I mean, it is almost like a 30-year-old movie, but sure, there is somebody who will complain that we're talking about this.
Right.
Hey, Ethan Hunt lives. Spoilers.
Yeah, right.
Tom Cruise makes it out. But yeah, that scene in question, I made a tweet about it because I did it just as the scene ended, to where I'm like, this is probably the greatest scene in this entire series, which is loaded with fantastic scenes.
Right.
But this is the best. This is like the high water mark of these sequences.
This movie, I believe it's the one movie where Ethan Hunt never fires a gun. Like he holds one at one point.
Yeah, he holds one,
but he never fires one bullet. Like this movie isn't about. It's got a lot of action and it's got a lot of tension and it's very exciting, but it's not a bang 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 action tension. It is a who's got the upper hand on the next person, who's who's going to get the guillotine versus who's going to get exonerated, who can get out of this alive, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you do get, like, even before this scene, you get the moment when the security guard comes into the room and it's like, I thought there were 3 of you, and you kind of get the sort of punch 'em up scene.
Right.
But yeah, it's not really like a shoot 'em up action movie, but that's also what is fantastic about the movie is that it could have, in lesser hands, this movie could have been that. It could have been, well, Ethan Hunt's gone rogues and now he's Rambo. He's just going to go and shoot everything up. And maybe it could have worked, but it definitely wouldn't have been as good as this Langley heist scene. And again, it's like the tension feels real because they set up, they're like, once this door is locked, the slightest change in anything triggers it and we're done. And you get the moment to where Jean Reno is holding him and you see the rat before he does. And you're like, oh no. And then just again, it's one of the most famous shots in this series to where Ethan just barely doesn't hit the ground.
And the way they set this up is so cool, and it's unique from any other Mission Impossible film where they have to find other disavowed or on the fringes of society mercenaries to form a new team because it's only Ethan and Claire left alive, and then they have to, basically trust these hired guns to help them pull off stealing this list out of an islanded computer in the middle of Langley, CIA headquarters. I love the way they talk to each other in that scene where he's like, it opens up and they're speaking in a kind of vernacular of their profession, but it doesn't lose you as the audience. It's not like Logan's Run where, he sits back and he's like, simple game. And they all know what that means. They know, oh, he's about to talk to us about a job.
Yeah, you feel like all 4 characters in that all worked for the IMF. They all know the shorthand, but they never push it too far to where the audience loses it.
Right.
And I think that's perfect because I think if you go too simple and hold the hand of the audience, it doesn't feel real. You have to strike that balance, and they really did. And also it's just like, watching Ethan and Luther's entire interactions in this movie, you understand why they're like, he is the second most, Ving Rhames is the second most important actor of this series next to Tom Cruise. So we're going to bring him back for all of them. And you get it, particularly by the end of this movie. And it's fantastic. Like I love that setup, but that whole heist scene, it's just like, because they set up early in the movie that the sort of way they use sort of cameras in this is sort of these sort of rounded, like almost Harry Potter glasses. Which again, it's just great that you set that up earlier on mission, so it's established technology, so you don't have to explain it later on. And then it sets up tension because Ethan starts sweating, and it adds this tension because instead of it just being sweat coming off his head, you see it go onto the glasses. And you're like, oh no. That's this entire sequence is just, oh no. It's literally comparative to and just because I watched the movie, to Robert Redford walking in sneakers, to where it's a similar setup to where it's just like, actually, did they rip off sneakers?
Well, I always see, here's the thing. I always felt like, because I was a huge fan of sneakers, I was a huge fan of sneakers before this movie.
Yeah, because that was 92.
Yeah, 92. And when I saw this, I was like, first, I loved the setup, but I always said, sneakers did it a little more realistically, because if you can do a pressure sensitive floor, you can do motion sensors. But I'm okay with, as long as the contrivance is there, the way they executed on that puzzle was amazing. Like,
if you set up your universe and you explain it well enough, the audience will go with it. It's once you start pushing it too far, which they never do in this scene, because they set up the sound, and there's even the moment where Luther is just like toast, like shut up, so that and then of course it ends with this, Jean Reno drops his knife, and it's there watching as the guy's coming, and you're just like, and it's just like, but immediately it hits just as the door opens.
If you think about the way this movie's pattern goes, there are escapes, but there are no chases.
After that, the guy looks up and everything is fine, and they're on the fire truck again.
There are moments of character building tension without endless car chase. And I don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to slam good car chases. What I'm saying is there are no car chases in between these moments in the middle of the film before the big action climax at the end on the Eurotunnel train. So what you have is you have stunt work in this movie, but the stunt work is deceptively impressive because it's not doing something like jumping off of a literal cliff or hanging from a helicopter. And yet the stunt work in this from Tom Cruise and the way they have to orchestrate it is no less, when you stop and think about it, it's no less like, oh my God, that's like I'll just show like right here.
Yeah. And
I mean,
and something I love about that, and again we go back to this sort of Ethan being so green, is like you would never see Ethan Hunt have a face like that in the newer movies. You know, like even when he falls off the helicopter in Fallout and grabs himself, like that like frantic, like, oh God, don't move anymore. And what I like is, and look, me and Mike are both James Bond fans, and James Bond is loaded with great, like, I just got away from here, but now I got to get in a car chase. Welcome for my horrible Sean Connery. But I like they replace that instead with tension scenes like the one that follows this, which is Ethan and Jean Reno's character. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like the tension of like who has the real necklace. That's what they have, and the sleight of hand and all that, only to end it with he had the real necklace the entire time. And again, going back to, I love that camaraderie between Ethan and Luther we see built, because even Luther is like, how'd you do? And it's like, he had it the entire time, which we'll talk about. I like the fact that they do bring that back in the new movie, the sleight of hand.
Oh yeah, the sleight of hand with the key.
I love, because as someone who rewatched, I was like, wait a second, that they set this up in the first movie, that somehow even, and they even continue to build tension with sort of this running clock of Ethan, because there's the news report, this guy's news report that his mom and uncle have been arrested because apparently all of his money wound up in their accounts from some offshore account, and that's just further cementing that, oh yeah, of course Ethan is the mole.
Right.
Which once again, we'll get to dead reckoning, and it's dead retconning.
I got my beefs with that for sure.
I do too. Because again, particularly after rewatching this movie and loving it so much, I'm like, why'd you have to do that?
Why'd you do that? Yeah.
Why couldn't he just be from the farm?
Yeah. And I love Raymond's, call out here that it's also a totally silent scene as far as no scoring behind it, which when you think about it, it was a really smart choice, because if you're about to take the audience into a room where you can't make noise, the most effective thing you can do on the soundtrack is to have no soundtrack at all, so that everybody in the theater is hearing every noise that's being made.
That's brilliant. Just work behind that with music, and it's almost like Jaws, to where the only time you hear the Jaws scene is when the shark is moving in for attack. They never fake it. Like even the scene when there's the kids sort of playing the prank, a lesser movie uses the theme there to be like, oh, it's the shark, but they don't. And it's the same thing here. It brings the audience more in, because you're almost tensing up as Ethan's making his moves, and you're almost like, because if I say something, somehow it's going to go wrong, which is not true. But yeah, it's like I said, I think it is easily the best scene in the whole series.
I
less is more, kids. Less is more.
Less is definitely more. But I really like the way this movie is constructed, the way it's shot, the paranoia and actual spy tension. There's parts of this that feel like 3 Days of the Condor. There's parts of it that feel like later films, like The Bourne Identity. It just it is a real spy movie in its own stylized way, and that's why I think that's why it resonated with me for so many years and still does. I do want to honor Bjorn's request. So here you go. If you're dealing with a man, let me try. Sorry, I got to reset. Sorry, that was bad.
Take two.
Yeah. If you're dealing with a man who has crushed, shot, stabbed, and detonated 5 members of his own IMF team, how devastated do you think you're going to make him by hauling Mom and Uncle Donald down to the county courthouse? There you go. There we go.
Is that Kid Trench?
What's that?
Was that Kittredge or
No, that was Tom Cruise talking to Kittredge on that phone.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. We now have to move on to Mission Impossible 2. And I'll just I'll bring that up here real quick so that everybody can see. So here was the poster for Mission Impossible 1. And here is the poster for Mission Impossible 2. It's extreme.
I was literally about to say it's extreme. Yeah. Look at that. He's got the flow.
Yeah.
He's got fire.
The whole soundtrack.
He's got a gun too.
Torn.
Limp Bizkit is on this soundtrack. Oh,
I mean, this was Metallica on the soundtrack.
Wait, is Limp Bizkit gonna date this movie upon arrival? Nah, we should be fine.
This was James Hetfield from Metallica at the height of his yeah. You know, like,
isn't that? I think I was watching I was rewatching the Mr. Sunday Movies reviews, and I think it was the Metallica song was what started the whole lawsuit with Napster, because that song leaked before the soundtrack came out, and I think that was what did it. Was
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. This movie is
terrible.
I mean, that right there says it all. It's a John Woo film, and it is okay, everybody, look, I'm going to just pull up this slide here because I think this is pretty eye-opening, all right? Even though we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, I want you to see this, okay? This movie has a run-on joke that the only way that Ethan and his team can ever solve the problem in the movie is because the problem always disintegrates to a level where they have to go rogue and or they're disavowed and have to clear their names every time. So let me just show you. There's only one film in the series where that doesn't happen, and that's the second one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the second film, that doesn't save it. It just makes it noteworthy.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the success of 3. Everyone was like, well, we got 3 of these. The one that really sucks is when he's just doing a mission as part of the IMF. And the 2 that are good. The one that is everybody loves, which is only the first one at that point.
I've heard a lot of people don't like the first one. They're like,
well, I was saying at the time, because in 06, the 3 is one of those movies that's just like, when it came out, everyone was like, but now it's
that's because of the second one. When 3
because of the second one, also that was also post the War of the Worlds press tour, which is involves Katie Holmes, a couch on Oprah, and a Matt Lauer interview. And I was like, you know what?
Right at that time,
let's just not watch Tom Cruise movies for a little bit.
Yeah. The second one, and I see some people in the chat saying, we really like the second one. Here's the thing: if you were like myself, and you were a John Woo fan, and you heard he was going to do a follow-up to a movie that you also really liked, I was really excited. Let me show you this picture. I was an intern at the Cannes Film Festival in 2000 for Kodak. I took this photograph on the Riviera, okay?
With a Kodak camera.
Yeah, with a Kodak camera, because I was so excited about the promotion that they were doing for Mission Impossible 2. That's
actually like insanely cool.
Yeah, that is me standing behind that camera taking that photograph. And so I'd seen the first one 5 times in 5 days. I owned the laser disc. All right. I was like ready for the next film.
And also to everyone in the chat who is either a normal subscriber to this channel or first time because we're doing Mission Impossible, to quote Ralph Garman, the fact that I don't like the movie should not interfere with your viewing experience whatsoever.
Right.
I don't like this movie because it's really dumb. But I also like a lot of dumb movies, but this one pushes it. Also, by the way, for everyone who was like, Anthony Hopkins doing a Transformer movie, that's weird, guys. He was in Mission Impossible 2. Which, by the way, this is like post, he won an Oscar for 16 minutes, and he was like, this is a good step for my career.
Well, I mean, if you're told you have 3 scenes with Tom Cruise in an air-conditioned room with a table and chairs, it's like, all right, I'll do it. Sure. That was the first thing that threw me off was the movie.
I hope they bring him back in the next one.
Yeah, right. The movie was already, aside from Ving Rhames and Tom Cruise, the movie did not have any other personalities that get carried over. So like, I was always asking, why isn't Kittredge the guy that he's talking to in this movie? Why is Kittredge gone? And that's something that they would continue with for a long time. They would just keep changing.
Yeah, until Alec Baldwin. He was
Yeah.
the only one, and then you know what happened to his character.
Right.
But yeah, this movie, with it being the only time, that's really nice. And
Mhm.
it's also like, I kind of wish particularly in like 4 and 5, I'm like, you could do that to where none of them are getting disavowed and having to go
Right.
rogue. Like,
Mhm.
there's no reason for it.
There's no
6,
reason.
there's at least kind of a reason, and 3, we'll talk about. There's a reason for the last act, but the
Mhm.
first 2, there's no reason.
Right. So the second
digress.
movie, for everybody who for those of you that don't know, this movie is, here's what Mission Impossible 2 is, because we don't really have to get into the plot all that much. Mission Impossible 2 is, if you take Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, you put John Woo action over it, and then you put one Last of the Mohicans moment right in the middle of it. Then you've got Mission Impossible 2. It is the story of Tom Cruise. Ethan Hunt is tasked with getting a cat burglar to help him figure out how this guy stole a bioweapon so that they can get it back before he uses it to really hurt the world. And the only way they can do that is by using this cat burglar, because the guy that stole the bioweapon is her old boyfriend. And so they're like, you need to re-endear yourself to him to find out what's going on, with his biotech firm or whatever, so that we can get this thing destroyed. That's Notorious, and I can prove it. So like, you've got Tom Cruise falling in love with her while he's trying to secure her for the mission, because she doesn't want to be part of some government job. She's not interested. And he's like, look, we'll clear up your record. We'll do, if you just help us out. But he doesn't know yet. He only knows he's supposed to secure her for the mission. He doesn't know what they want.
Yeah, he doesn't know the reason why.
Right. When he finds out, they fall in love while he's trying to, secure her for the mission.
As you do.
As one does. Then the next morning, literally, he has to go for the meeting with Anthony Hopkins so that Anthony can tell him what the parameters of the mission are. And that's when he finds out the parameters of the mission are, you've got to get her to pretend to be back in love with her old boyfriend who's still obsessed with her, because that way we'll start to get inside information. Now, Notorious, Alfred Hitchcock, is the same scenario with Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman, except it's a film about Ingrid Bergman's father was like a Nazi in World War II, and her father's friend still lives in Argentina, and he had like a thing for her, which is creepy because it was his friend's daughter, but whatever. So they're like,
the 40s.
We need you to go butter this guy up and make it feel like you really like this guy. Well, she falls in love with Cary Grant the first night that he's trying to figure out who this woman is, and as far as like how he's going to get her to agree to this operation. But he doesn't know either that what the operation actually is wooing this guy back. And I just want to show you real
This
quick.
is like a True Lies situation, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, so
they're like, here's this old movie. We're just going to kind of make a new action movie out of it.
Yeah.
One of these worked, kids, and one of them's called Mission Impossible 2.
Here is an image from, in both instances, there is a reckless car scene. In this case, they're both in the car, but it's the same idea.
Well, they were definitely like, that GoldenEye movie was really good.
Right.
Let's do that.
Yeah, they were taking GoldenEye and mashing it up with Notorious. And then we have this moment here, which is a clip I've pulled back to back, just to show you the immediate similarities between Notorious and Mission Impossible 2.
She's had no experience.
Oh, come now. What experience does she lack, do you think?
She's never been trained for that kind of work. They'll see through her.
She's got no training for this kind of thing.
But to go to bed with a man and lie to him, she's a woman. She's got all the training she needs.
I mean, it's the same plot. And then when they have to catch up with her, they have to arrange a time to meet to find out what intel she's learned. Well, guess what, everybody? In the original Notorious, where do they meet? Well, if I can find my stupid slide, and I can't, did it really not upload? That's
StreamYard.
Thanks, StreamYard. Well, anyway, They meet at a horse track in Notorious where she's looking through binoculars and they have to meet down by the fence, which is exactly what happens in Mission Impossible 2.
Yeah. Now that you do all this, someone definitely was a fan of Notorious.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because all the similarities were, and I've never heard of that film until 5 minutes ago when you started talking about it. Yeah, that's one of those things to where it's like they definitely knew what they were doing, which is fine. George Lucas took a lot of stuff from like Searchers and Seven Samurai. It's not a bad thing.
You're gonna love this, Matt. You're gonna love this because in true Alfred Hitchcock fashion, because guys like J.J. Abrams, I know we're about to talk about MI3, and we're about to talk about this word again, but guys like George Lucas and J.J. Abrams perverted the meaning of the word MacGuffin. They use it too much. Nobody knows what it actually means anymore. Yeah. Alfred Hitchcock's definition of MacGuffin
I thought MacGuffin was just McGruff the crime dog's brother, honestly.
MacGuffin is a thing that the audience at first thinks is a plot device, but then the audience realizes they don't have to care about it at all.
Yeah, it's money in Psycho. It's like,
yes,
you think it's so important and it's nothing.
In this Notorious film, they think the audience, you're led to believe that what your focus is whatever this. It's not a bioweapon in this film. It's they think they're developing something that might be able to give them. I think it's like atomic research or something. I don't remember. But what you actually find out is the real plot, because it's like a hard left, is this woman actually ends up getting married to this guy as part of her deep cover, right? This man's mother, this man's mother who lives with them, she starts to figure out that something's not right, but instead of telling anybody, she just starts slowly poisoning her.
The most unrealistic part of that is a mother who believes something about her daughter-in-law is wrong and she does not go blab it to 5 other women.
Right.
So, Alfred, you don't know women, I think.
That's the whole thing. Is like in Mission Impossible 2, she injects herself with the last Chimera virus or whatever it is, because Bellerophon, whatever it's called, because Tom Cruise couldn't get all of them destroyed before he got interrupted, and so in order to prevent herself from being killed, and she injects herself with it, but now Tom Cruise only has 24 hours to save her life.
Yeah,
it's a very different action-based tech version of what happens in Notorious, but it's nonetheless the love interest who's sent on the mission that the guy who fell in love with her doesn't want to send her on, and then meets her at a horse track at one point to get information that she's learned, then has to save her from a poisoning. He has to save her from dying from a disease. And it's the same movie. And there's also one more moment in this.
But does Cary Grant do any slow-mo split kits? I think
no, he does not. He does not
there's
ride
no
a motorcycle.
joust down motorcycles.
There's no slow motion with a pistol. Like there's no, but Cary Grant, no. But there is.
I swear Tom Cruise grew his hair out just for the slow-mo.
Oh, I bet you're right. I wouldn't doubt it.
He's like, this will look incredible, John.
This is gonna look amazing. There's one other moment in this scene that at the time I saw the movie, it pulled me out of it completely. And you're about to see why. I thought it was ridiculous. All right, here we go.
Stay alive, no matter what occurs. I will find you. Just stay alive! I'm not going to lose you!
Like, I mean, did John Woo just really love Daniel Day-Lewis or something? Like, was that his Last of the Mohicans Michael Mann reference right there? I mean,
had to have been somebody. Oh God. Look, I really like Tom Cruise as an actor, but like it's like a you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about when you put him next to Daniel Day-Lewis. You're like, okay. Okay. It's like if you put like Tom Hanks and Daniel Craig next to each other, it's like these guys in a different caliber, ain't they?
It's more the similarity of aping the line from the movie. It's the most famous line in Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
And like they're not just using the line, they're using it with the same situation, the same intonation, and the same angle. and everything. And it's like,
It's to the point to where it's so referential, it's not accidental.
yeah, exactly.
Like you can't just say, oh, which, hey, look, screenplay writers, I'm sure that happens all the time. There are random lines to where you're just like,
right.
It just comes into your head, but like
Mhm.
that is just so specific. Someone had to be like,
Right.
Last
here-
of the Mohicans, guys.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I want to be clear about something. I don't have a problem with them using Notorious as an inspiration to do their film. All right, I don't. I really don't.
Yeah, no, because that's
but-
like I brought up True Lies. Like that is inspired by the French film.
Right,
Like,
but you've got to execute on it properly. And this movie is all style and no substance. There's nothing holding this movie together. It is just, now the one thing this movie did, and I stupidly forgot to get a shot of it. I thought I had a shot of it. The one thing this movie did was, for the franchise, it starts us down the path of Tom Cruise doing very dangerous stunts.
Yeah, the rock climbing.
The rock climb.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. And yeah, but it does sort of, because in the last movie, it was like the stunts had to do with the story. There's the Langley heist. There's all the stuff on the train. Whereas the rock climbing, it's like, this has nothing to do with anything.
Right. It doesn't. And that's not unique to that was the time and place that movies post Matrix didn't understand why the Matrix was popular.
Yeah.
And so what they thought was, we all have to do just these really cool disjointed visuals with action things happening that don't actually have anything to do with the plot, but it's cool, therefore people will think the movie is cool. So like when you watch either of Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider movies, there is so much extemporaneous actiony posturing business going on that has nothing to do with moving the story forward at all.
They're all shots just for a trailer.
Yeah. And then they have to stay in the movie for added running time. It's a real mess. But this movie, I was so disinterested in it that, as I've said at the beginning of the stream, I bowed out of the Mission Impossible series, and I thought it was actually dead after that, because the film, well, it made a lot of money because a lot of people who didn't get to see part one in the theater saw it on home video, and they were all, a lot more people than not, really liked Mission Impossible 1. It did very well at the box office, and they all said, ooh, let's all go back, I was one, to see Mission Impossible 2. And then everybody was like, oh no. And so that movie made a ton of money, but it didn't endear anybody to come back for another go.
It's why I always say box office does not always equal quality film.
No, not at all. It at box office is actually in large part a reward for the goodness of the previous movie in many ways.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like you're coming back and putting in the tip.
You're talking about franchises, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what I mean, franchises.
Yeah.
And I did kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing here, just so you know. Here we go. So Mission Impossible 2 is the highest grossing Mission Impossible film. It made over $973 million. Mission Impossible 1 made, this is all adjusted for inflation, everyone. I adjusted all of this properly for inflation. Mission Impossible 1 made the equivalent of $890 million. So when Mission Impossible 3 finally came out, it only managed $604 million, even though it is the better film than Mission Impossible 2. And I'm just joking here a little bit, but not, is that extra $369 million that MI2 earned was the tip jar for Mission Impossible 1, because they didn't get it back for MI3. So I adjusted MI1's full take to $1.3 billion for myself, making it the number one grossing film. And now with that and that disingenuous math, I will go back to the live stream. All right.
I've done math since like my sophomore year of college.
It was very hard for me, and I needed a lot of devices to do it. Yeah.
Okay. Just like Tom Cruise action.
Okay, so I have a theory about Mission Impossible 3. Here's the poster for Mission Impossible 3. Came out in 2006. Okay.
They're keeping the style, which is Tom Cruise's profile.
That's right. They're there for a while, for a long time. We joked in film school that every Tom Cruise poster was just a giant head of Tom Cruise. That's
What
all.
was the one that started that? Because I know Jerry Maguire has that.
And Mission Impossible 1.
Yeah, but I'm saying, was there one before that? Because I'm like,
Vanilla Sky was just his big head.
Days of Thunder was.
Days of Thunder was just
it was just his head. I think Days of Thunder was the one that started it.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Thanks, Tony. It's all your fault for ruining movie posters for like a decade.
This movie was originally supposed to be directed by David Fincher, and he couldn't agree on the artistic tone of the film with the producers and everybody else, so he bowed out. And then another filmmaker came on. I can't remember who that was, and he also couldn't get it going by 2004. So we're now 4 years out from the last film. In the meantime, Kenneth Branagh was supposed to be a villain of a different name. And Scarlett Johansson was supposed to be in the movie, along with I can't remember the other actress. There was another actress as well, and all of them had to bow out because they all had other commitments because the development.
That sucks because Branagh is like, he's a very good director, and also his Jack Ryan movie is pretty solid. So if he could have pulled off, directing, acting, and that,
Branagh wasn't even going to be directing; he was just going to be the villain.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, Tom, that's your own fault for not thinking of him as doing both.
So this could have been a Kenneth Branagh as the villain with Scarlett Johansson and that other person whose name has escaped me, another actress. We're going to be in the film. Anyway,
were they playing the same characters that Philip Seymour Hoffman and Michelle Monaghan were playing, or?
No, I think the script went through some revision as well at that point. Also, they had some budget stuff, and Tom Cruise ultimately, just to get this movie greenlit fast enough so it didn't keep going out and out and out, he took a huge pay cut to please the Paramount brass.
Yeah, because at a certain point, if you wait too long, it's like, what's even the point?
Mm-hmm. This is a J.J. Abrams film, and
that's when Michael begins.
Look, I think it's relevant because he got a multi Mission Impossible picture deal for Bad Robot by doing this.
Yeah. And this movie is also what kind of started the Abranisms.
Yes.
Which we bring up that word MacGuffin once again, which is just like, we're just going to have this thing. Never going to explain it. Although J.J. Abrams likes to call it his mystery box.
Which is, again, like J.J. Abrams' mystery box is as empty as his vision for these kind of movies. He's all about emotional beats and visuals with nothing to support them. Like I can anecdotally prove it with this movie, but jokingly, I do want to point out that I also feel that a lot of this movie was because I just get the sense that J.J. Abrams came off whatever the last project was, having played way too much Metal Gear Solid Snake, because this movie makes Tom Cruise Solid Snake.
Well, me and my friend were saying when we talked about these movies on our podcast, we were like, even though I have not watched a full movie of Jason Bourne, I still know the visuals, and I'm like, there was definitely a Bourne feel they wanted to go for this one.
Right.
I think that's sort of like, they're like, we went way too far with the action. Let's try and ground it.
But even with that, it's funny. They went too far with the stylization of the action, but the action in this movie with the gunplay and everything is still very much here where it wasn't in the original.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to catch 2 super chats before we get any farther. Thank you so much, Sylvester, for the kind super chat. He says, just tuned in, maybe missed, but is Timothy Dalton as Ethan Hunt already discussed? Just joking. I'll shut up now. Greetings from Amsterdam. Greetings to you, sir. And I also have here from Salvador. Thank you so much for the kind super chat. He says, Matt, are you even old enough to watch these movies without parental guidance? I jest. I've to date never seen a Mission Impossible movie, and I feel like I'm better for it. See you in a couple of weeks, Michael. I will see you soon, sir.
First off, my dad abandoned me when he went to Iconic again, so screw him. I'm going to watch whatever movies I want to watch. That's one of those jokes that if the further we get away from the second Iconicon, no one's going to know.
Well,
it's just going to be this weird thing between me and Ryan.
That's all right, though. Good jokes among friends. Okay, so here's the plot of the. Actually, you know what? This isn't right, Matt. This is one of your favorite films in the series. You give everybody the overarching plot.
Yeah. So basically, the plot of this one, we find Ethan Hunt he's no longer a field op. He's a training kind of official in the IMF, and he's engaged, and that's kind of how we open the movie. Is he's engaged to Michelle Monaghan because this is 2006, and who the hell wouldn't want to be engaged to Michelle Monaghan in 2006?
Right.
I saw Kiss Kiss Bang Bang for the first time this year, and I'm like, Michelle Monaghan. Tom, you lucky dog. But going back to the plot, not just my horrible jokes. Sorry. So he's engaged, but he finds out that one of his sort of former pupils, who is a J.J. Abrams regular, has been sort of captured.
That right there is Felicity, everybody.
Has been captured, and basically she has gone on this mission. It's very important because it's dealing with Philip Seymour Hoffman's villain. And she basically has knowledge of something that they need. And so it's vitally important that we get her back. So Ethan decides that despite the fact that he's happy training, he's going to go back. He goes back, he gets her, but she gets killed, which kind of leads to this whole string of Ethan now kind of having a vendetta towards Philip Seymour Hoffman. And so he's going after him. And there's this thing that Philip Seymour Hoffman has called the rabbit's foot.
Right.
I tell you what it is, but we never get to know. Lawrence Fishburne is here for some reason. But of course, things happen. Ultimately, Michelle Monaghan gets captured by Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Right.
And now Ethan must go rogue in order to save her, of which he does, along with his team of agents who are always totally happy to risk their jobs.
But that's what's crazy to me. The reason he has to go rogue is because even though this guy, his name's like Davian or something, even though he has captured this man's fiance, it is his wife at this point.
Well, yeah, they get married at like
they got married like in an impromptu wedding ceremony. Even though this man has captured and threatened to kill this woman, somehow the IMF twists it around and believes that Ethan is somehow in collusion with this guy over this stolen rabbit's foot thing. Like,
yeah, because they capture him, but then he gets saved. And I think a pretty cool sequence on the bridge. So that it's once again, it's going back to that first movie to where there's somebody in IMF who is helping Philip Seymour Hoffman out. And so that's basically the plot of the movie, and I wasn't able to make a Boogie Nights joke throughout the entire synopsis, so I'm so stupid.
Here's the thing that drives me nuts about this from a J.J. Abrams perspective is that I've always seen J.J. Abrams as this guy who really wants to be Spielberg but doesn't know how.
What? No.
I know, right? He doesn't know how, and so he creates empty emotional moments that he doesn't even realize he's deliberately undercutting his own momentum.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, because J.J. Abrams, that is so true. And you see in so many movies, and even when he talks about stuff like Closing Time and stuff, he has a real like reverence for Steven Spielberg and the films he did in the 70s and 80s. But there is this sort of like thing of, which is maybe not nice to say, but like there's only one Steven Spielberg, and it's fine to be inspired by these people, but if your inspiration is kind of just basically highway robbery, I'm not going to use Super 8, you're always going to be lesser. And it's like, it's fine to be inspired by these people. And there's thousands of directors who are inspired by Hitchcock and all these things. But, or we even talk about with Lucas, with, like Kurosawa and all that. But like, it's not just trying to do a 1-for-1. And unfortunately, J.J. Abrams is kind of only good at doing a 1-for-1 of whomever, he's trying to do at that moment.
Yeah, he's, and Jason says the biggest mystery is why Ethan Hunt keeps working for an organization that always believes he's up to no good and working against them.
Because they have good medical care. And there was about to be the housing crisis like 2 years later, so Ethan knew he had to be careful.
Do you get dental with that? Um,
No, I don't think they do. They don't even get dental.
Here's my problem with Abrams in this. Okay, so Philip Seymour Hoffman is an amazing actor. Or may he rest in peace. He was an amazing actor, and he was a really, really good choice for any project you put him in. So as a villain, he's playing a sadistic sociopath in a very believable way.
Yeah, that plane scene is great.
Yeah, and when the plane scene especially, where they've captured him.
You have a girlfriend? You have a wife? I'm going to find her and I'm going to kill her.
Yeah, like it's very believable, and he is by far the best part of the movie. Like but here's the problem. The problem isn't with him. The problem is the way J.J. Abrams misuses him. So the cold open of the film is forward in time, where Seymour Hoffman's character, I believe his name's Davian or something like that. He's got Julia, and he's going to kill her unless Tom Cruise gives up the rabbit's foot, because even though Tom Cruise already gave up the rabbit's foot, Davian says, what you gave me is fake, and it's not the real rabbit's foot. And now Tom Cruise is fighting because he's only got 10 seconds to try and save her life. Well, when you finally, the title sequence begins before you know what happens to Julia, then the movie has to catch up to this moment. And when it does, he goes through a truncated version of the sequence again, so we don't have to watch the whole open again. And then he doesn't convince him. And because he said earlier in the film, you have a girlfriend or a wife, I'm going to kill them right in front of you when I have a chance. You will see them die in front of you. And he shoots her, and she's dead. And Tom Cruise is like, well, then J.J. Abrams does the thing J.J. Abrams always does, which is, well, Davian leaves. He thinks he's got, what he needs or whatever. And then Tom Cruise is like, oh, it wasn't her. It was somebody else who's one of Davian's thugs or whatever that
his translator.
Yes, translator who messed up, and he punished her by putting the mask on her.
To which I said to my friends when I talked about this movie on their podcast last month, I was like, what about the bodyguard? He screwed up too.
Yeah.
He just gets to live, I guess.
There is no reason, after the way they've established this villain, that he would not have actually just shot Julia. Like he or Julie or whatever her name is. He would have killed her right in front of him. He would. There was no reason he would just conveniently leave her alive.
Because the entire thing of this, the whole sort of count to 10 moment is Damon basically just needs to know if what he has is a real rabbit's foot, and he's found that this is the way, which he does. He basically proves that this is, because he's all the sort of ways he's trying to make it seem like he doesn't have it are all BS, which can only mean he has the real thing.
Right. Which I felt like it
makes no sense for him to have the actual one and still do this. It's really done just so that we can get the
the thing off, and then also
what a twist.
And then you get to the very end set piece, and it feels very anticlimactic because he's trying to get that bomb out of his head that was in Felicity's head at the beginning of the movie, and he's getting an extra long amount of time to get his out, but that's movie magic, neither here nor there. And then he has to, in 3 seconds, teach his wife how to effectively use a Beretta so that she can conveniently kill Davian and the IMF turncoat all within 5 minutes of each other. And so they all just kind of get shot. And then there's all this backslapping and smiles going on at the IMF, where they were about to incarcerate, and they betrayed Ethan Hunt 5 minutes before, and then they just walk off like a happy couple. And the movie's over. And I'm like, wow, JJ, is this what you think Steven Spielberg movies are? Because I don't feel JJ Abrams earns anything in that movie. I feel like he just puts it in front of you and expects you to kind of take it for granted because the visuals are nice.
I will say this as someone who for the longest time said this was his favorite of this series. I still think this is a lot of good things going for it. It's mostly just the cast is Tom Cruise and Michelle Monaghan and PCH and Ving Rhames are all really good. But the more I watch this movie, I'm like, this doesn't really work. Particularly after rewatching the first movie, like, holy shit, that really does work.
Yeah.
I honestly, the ending, and it almost goes back to, there was this rumor that this was going to be the last Mission Impossible movie Tom Cruise did, and that like Brad Pitt was going to take over the series. It almost feels like they were making it with that in mind, because like, okay, fine, that's how Ethan Hunt's story ends, is he walks off into the sun, not really committal to the IMF anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Which I guess is fine. But yeah, no, it's
that's another mistake this movie makes, is by giving him a wife.
It's
go from, like, it's like giving Indiana Jones a wife. It's like, what did you just do?
And I think that's because I think maybe they thought this was going to be it, and then they were like, no, let's do another one, and immediately, you know, you have to deal with that. Which,
right?
I mean, I liked Julie's character, so I kind of hated how they were just like, they got divorced.
Yeah,
because Ethan was, I was like, sure, okay. I will say, talking about that IMF stuff, you can call it hang a lampshade on it, but Henry Cavill's speech in the 6th movie, he does point this out to Angela Bassett, where he's like, how many times can Hunt's government disavow him and try to kill him before he's had enough? It's like, he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong.
He's the bad guy, but he's not wrong.
He's not wrong. This track record is ridiculous. It's almost like the U.S. government is like, oh, we don't actually directly try to solve problems. What we do is make problems for our agents so that they will then go solve problems. Like,
it almost makes you question why anyone would want to work for the IMF. It's
which
like,
which
you guys really just kind of like don't trust us at a certain point, do you? You all think our turncoats are going to murder each other.
Yeah,
all right. That's
that is why I maintain that it worked as,
like I said, they must have a killer health plan.
Well, it worked as a plot for the first movie because they made it very clear this doesn't happen ever. And this is a very intense, weird, and dire situation. And then suddenly the rest of the movies just make it like it's another Thursday. And it's
and particularly in this one, to where it's really the third act is where he goes totally rogue. And it's just like, because it's weird. Because it's like there's so many points in the movie, and the way they get around this is they basically steal the same thing, which is there's a mole, except instead of it being Billy Crudup, Tom Cruise thinks that it's Lawrence Fishburne, so obviously he can't tell anybody,
right?
Because Lawrence Fishburne's evil, so if I tell him they have my wife, like she's gonna die because he's working with it's.
Yeah.
You know what? I miss when J.J. Abrams wrote Armageddon. That's what I miss.
Did he write Armageddon? That doesn't.
He did. Yeah, he wrote Armageddon.
Now I really know why I hated that movie. Okay.
Oh, I love that movie.
That brought everything together. So now we're on to Mission Impossible 4: Ghost Protocol.
Yeah.
And
that one.
Yeah, the hoodie one.
This is the weird one for me, to where I'm like, it's not a terrible movie, but there's something about the story that's always lacking, and I think
forgettable.
It's a very forgettable movie. Visually, it's fantastic, and particularly coming from a director who mostly had done just animation. Brad Bird does not seem like a novice doing all these action scenes, but the story this movie feels like, because of how they ended 3, this feels like a bridge movie to what they are doing with the movies starting with Rogue Nation. And they're like, but we have to do this movie because we have to explain away Michelle Monaghan and Ethan being back to field work and all these things that we set up in 3, we basically have to get rid of. But unfortunately,
why it's dumb that they ever did that to begin with.
Yeah. And then also, as we said at the top of this stream, poor Jeremy Renner being brought in because they're like, Tom Cruise might not do these movies anymore. So Jeremy, this could be your series.
It could be.
Jeremy, it's not.
It won't be, but it could be. And there's Jeremy Renner talking to Tom Cruise, asking him if he can take over the series. Yeah. This movie's very forgettable. It's all about trying to get stolen nuclear codes, nuclear launch codes. And
again, you don't get as invested into it as at least I do with the first movie, to where the knock list and all of that, they really set up very well how this is a problem for everybody if Max gets a hold of this. So we can't have this happen.
Yep. And
whereas in this movie, it's kind of just like it goes back to sort of classic James Bond, which is just like the villain's going to try and blow up the world. So James, don't let him blow up the world. But we're not really going to dwell on that because we know he's not going to blow up the world.
Which is why I thought it was weird that they were even able to do the gymnastics to come up with a go rogue plot, because this seems like a very straightforward mission. They get him. He's undercover in a Russian prison, I believe, if I recall correctly. Yeah, or was that the next one? That's the next one. No,
yes,
it is.
Because this one he's kind of on his own. Because this is the one where he's got the beard, if I'm not mistaken. This is unforgettable. Me and Michael can't distinguish if this is Ghost Protocol or
Rogue Nation.
Rogue Nation.
Okay, hold on. I see. This is why I was like torturing myself, trying to. Okay, so there's.
In the meantime, kids, I will entertain you with my impression of Tom Cruise running.
Let's see. Ethan escaped. Benji. Yeah, this is the one with the prison. So. Okay.
Yeah,
he's undercover at a prison, Russian prison, because he's doing something else that you find out later is also tied to him trying to get information on some part of the plot.
And that's also what I hate about this is going back to that first movie. The first mission is meaningless to the rest of the plot, just like James Bond. The opening is just to set up where James Bond is, where the IMF team is. It should not directly relate to. It's fine. Indiana Jones directly relates into everything else, but that's a different series.
Right. Yeah. That's why I love that opening pre-title bit of the first movie, because it's classic Mission Impossible, where they're tricking a guy into giving up information by making him think that they're other people, and also psychologically messing with him by making him think he just accidentally murdered someone.
Yeah.
It's a really brilliant little bit, and they do some of that in Ghost Protocol where they're trying to like. But at this point, it's become Ethan now is like omniscient, and he's thinking 20 steps ahead of everybody. And he's going like, all right, so what I'm going to do is I already know what these people are going to say and who's going to show up and when they're going to show up. And so I know who to take out and then wear a mask and then do this. And it's like, it's very clever writing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I stop having suspense though, because it's so engineered. It's so like we're more interested in being clever than we are in telling you something plausible.
And when you write your character to be so many steps ahead and to be so strong, it's hard to get invested that anything is going to happen to him.
Right.
And this is what I hate, because it's like Die Hard works because John McClane is just a normal cop. The first Mission Impossible movie works because Ethan Hunt he's a really good field agent, but he's not the best. And whereas by this point, and that's why they just have to do increasingly crazy stunts, which I love, and it's impressive that an actor of his caliber is willing to do them himself, because there are other actors of Tom Cruise caliber who would be sitting in the trailer while some stunt man risks his life. But it's like, that's what you have to do, because if you tried to tell a plot like the first movie, it wouldn't work, because we're all like, well, yeah, obviously Ethan's going to do it.
Right.
Which again, look, the superhero movies have been doing that since 78. It's like, we all know Batman's going to win in the end.
Right.
We know. Sometimes it's not the destination, it's the journey of how you get there. And sometimes believing for a moment they won't get there is what makes it fun. And this movie, they don't do that. You just feel like, of course, Ethan's fine.
This movie really starts. It started a little bit in 3, but this movie really starts the pattern that the other Mission Impossible films will follow. Which is Ethan has to go rogue, or he's disavowed. One or the other. It's part and parcel of the same thing.
Yeah.
Then there's a chase, and then that chase bridges to a stunt, and then that stunt bridges to a chase, and then that chase bridges to another big stunt. And that's kind of the movies now. This movie, and again, visually, Brad Bird did a really great job. It's very impressive, like the whole climbing the building.
Yeah, Burj Khalifa.
Yeah, like it's extremely impressive in its mechanics. But then when you get to the actual plot, which is trying to get the nuclear codes, and then you have like people fist fighting in a hotel, and it almost feels cookie cutter. It feels like paint by numbers. As far as the plot beats,
it just feels like a standard like spy action movie in the 2010s. Just like, okay, Like
Yeah.
we've hit all our beats. We're going to have these action sequences. They're going to lead to this. That's going to lead to another action sequence. And we'll have fight scenes and, but we'll throw in this really cool scene with the tallest building in the world. And Tom Cruise, which, as I've said, since this movie, he's just trying to kill himself on film.
G-Force, it's not about the fact that obviously all films are scripted. What I'm trying to say, I won't speak for Matt, but what I'm trying to say is when you are executing on your story properly and credibly, these moments, especially in a movie that requires the audience to feel tense and to feel like a sense of anticipation and anxiety, you've got to play it with a real, like, a grounded reality. You've got to play it even when you do something fantastical. If you've set up the rules properly, the audience isn't going to feel like this is just, oh, okay.
Every movie is scripted, but the really good ones have a script to where it doesn't feel scripted. It feels natural. And this movie feels, as Michael said, very paint by numbers, very like there are moments we want to hit.
Got it.
And it's again, we literally just talked about the first movie does that. The first movie is scripted, but it feels natural in how everything leads into something else.
Right. And like I'm
a horrible script writer. So whoever wrote Ghost Protocol is better than me.
There are very clever sequences in this movie, like the sequence that precedes this one, where they're tricking, they're in hotel rooms, identical hotel rooms on different levels, and they're pretending to be they're tricking two parties at the same time to have the same meeting. It's very cleverly written.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Tom Cruise's character at this point has started because he comes up with the whole plan. Everybody else is like, there's no way we can do this at this point. We're out of time. The mask machine is broken and this is not going to happen. And he's like, no, we're going to do this. And we're, he almost forgets to take off his goggles because he's so focused on the plan that he's come up with. Everybody else is like, this is nuts. And he's like, no, we're going to do this and this and this because they're going to do this, 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 and that. And all I'm thinking in that moment is Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt has become this infallible meta mind that can and I'm going, I don't know if this serves the franchise all that well, because now the characters from this movie forward, they really all start looking to him all the time to come up with the whole thing. And all I hear in my head is,
"Help me, Tom Cruise! Use a witchcraft on me to get the fire off me!"
just I'm kind of like, okay. It
starts to feel less like a team movie and more like an Ethan Hunt and Friends movie.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as interesting.
It's not. I read a fascinating interview a few weeks ago where apparently Emilio Estevez and Tom Cruise are still friends, and that's why Tom had wanted him in the first movie. And Tom apparently expressed regret several years ago, saying
killing him off.
He was like, if I had been more forward thinking, I definitely wouldn't have killed you off. I would have loved to have been doing more of these movies with you. And I kind of sat back and I was like, yeah, that would have been nice. I really liked Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, that's kind of the Sylvester Stallone Apollo Creed, where he's like, maybe I shouldn't have killed off Apollo because Apollo is like a real good actor,
Right. Yeah, it's
one of those things where it's unfortunate and it works real well in both of those instances, but you're also like, yeah, could have been good. But we might not have gotten Luther and Ving Rhames if Emilio Estevez, so it's a trade-off.
Yeah. Now
Luther is the tech guy after Emilio Estevez dies. So
right, and this is the movie where Simon Pegg finally becomes a field agent.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure he regretted immediately after that, because his wagon was hitched to the most ne'er-do-well, often disavowed guy in the whole group.
Yeah, he's like, can I go back to the lab?
Right, please, can I please go back in?
Please,
so what do you think of this movie? As far I find, I don't. How do I put this? I found the movie forgettable as I was watching it. It just didn't. It didn't. Aside from the hotel room sequence and the climbing the tower, I can't really.
As I said when we first started, this movie feels like a bridge movie. It feels like a movie that had to they definitely knew where they wanted to take the series after 3, but they looked at 3 and went, there's so much that happens here, you know, in the end, that we need to sort of it can't just be as simple by this point. And given the plot of 3, it's not a James Bond to where we can kind of just pick up wherever, because if you don't mention Michelle Monaghan, if you don't mention him no longer doing field work like you have to, so it almost feels like they just like crafted a kind of quick story to solve all the problems they wanted to, and it just feels like an movie.
Yeah. It's just
Look, I know people who this is their favorite, and to which I say, more power to you. I like Batman Forever, so what do I know?
Right. Yeah.
That's what I always say. I always bring up an example like that to where I'm like, you know what? Doesn't matter. Because again, to quote Ralph Garman, me and Michael just thinking this movie is okay does not affect your viewing experience. If it does,
like
Michael's well studied, but if I'm changing your view on a movie to be negative,
I didn't walk away from this movie like spitting fire. Like I didn't lose any sleep over this movie. This movie is not like a hated film in my experience.
It's just a movie that it's just like, this is the movie that I will watch if I binge all the movies. But there's no point to where I'm like, you know what I want to do tonight? Watch Ghost Protocol.
You know what we should do tonight? Ghost Protocol. No, I don't think so. No, I'm good. All right, so Rogue Nation. Now, I told Melinda.
Now, as you can see, they've kind of brought back the first poster, but they've added other people too.
They started to add more people to it. Now after this one, Jeremy Renner will be deleted yet again, but
in more ways than one.
That's right.
Because if you kind of know what happened with that series,
Bourne.
Basically, I'll tell it now, so we don't have to waste time and Fallout. Basically, they were going to bring it back in Fallout, but they were going to kill off his character. So he was like, no, because they had really decided at that point. Tom Cruise was like, I'm not leaving this series. So his character was superfluous.
Right. His character was just a stand-in that was never going to take center stage. Yeah. Okay. So Rogue Nation, when I first saw this, I did enjoy watching this movie far more markedly than when I say enjoyed. I wasn't miserable during Ghost Protocol, but it didn't really spark anything with me. It was just kind of like,
it didn't really grip you.
This is a movie. Here is an explosion. Here are the credits. This movie, on the other hand, I was like, okay, this movie has a lot going on. And while I still think, and this is why I find it hilarious that people think that the first one is the confusing one, because these movies have gotten so overwrought and confusing by this point, with the switchbacks and the subterfuge and this person wearing a mask of this person, these people guessing who these people are, and all this kind of stuff. Okay, so this movie, walk us through just a little bit of this, the premise of this, Matt, if you can.
Please don't, because I can't. He hangs on a plane. Jack Ryan's there, and there's a motorcycle chase, and Rebecca Ferguson is there.
Right. So at the very beginning, he's got to stop this shipment of nerve gas on a plane, and he and his team are there, and he does one of the biggest stunts in the Mission Impossible series up into that point, where Tom Cruise actually hangs off the side of it's the equivalent of a C-130 that's taking off in real time. Yeah. And he's just hanging on the side of it, hoping that Simon Pegg will open the door via remote laptop access, the magical Deus Ex Machina laptop hacking they always have. And then the plot starts to get muddy for me, because there's a guy. Is this the beginning of this? Is this the beginning of the Syndicate? Yeah, this is the beginning of the Syndicate.
Yeah, because there's Rebecca Ferguson and him are both going to the opera. She's going to kill this guy, but he needs information from this guy, and so that's how they get intertwined together.
But isn't this the one where he first he goes back to the safe house after this operation with the nerve gas, where he completes that, and he thinks that he's checking in with IMF and finds out that this guy has taken over that safe house, and that guy gasses him, and he wakes up tied to a pole, surrounded by all these dudes that are getting ready to torture him and cut him up. And that's where
You're right. Yeah, I'm
no. These are
switching
very
it around.
confusing movies. So I sympathize. So Ilsa Faust he meets her there while he's tied to the pole, or handcuffed to it or whatever. And as this dude is getting ready to use his implements of pain and torture on him, Ilsa kind of gives him the signal, like, I'm not who they think I am.
She pulls a Rene Rousseau in Lethal Weapon 3.
Yes, and she helps him get out of this whole thing, and he finds out that she is, well, no, he doesn't find this out yet. She lets him get away. Now we're at the
opera,
the opera, because he gets Simon Pegg, Simon Pegg is now working at the IMF headquarters again, and Alec Baldwin is now the head of the CIA, and he hates the IMF.
Yeah.
He wants it defunded. He wants it completely dismantled. And he keeps putting Simon Pegg through lie detector tests to try and see if Simon is still in contact with Ethan. Because Ethan did not come back in out of the cold when he dismantled the IMF. So Ethan, by default, is now rogue.
Yeah.
Right? Of course. So Ethan tells Simon, he tricks him by sending him tickets that he won to an opera in it's not Prague, it's doesn't matter,
some European country,
some Eastern European country, and he goes, it might be Kiev or something like that, it might be Kiev, and he goes and he's trying to help Ethan figure out, once he gets there, he realizes Ethan brought him there. He's like, we're going to the opera because I have this feeling that the people that are behind this syndicate are going to be there. And when they all get into the opera, Ethan sees this Ilsa woman in the lighting equipment, the lighting rigs, and she's got a sniper rifle. And then there's these two big, beefy Aryan-looking dudes, and they also have like makeshift, fancy James Bond style hidden rifles, like ones that made out of a flute and some other stuff. And he doesn't know what's going on. And that's when he finds out that Ilsa is actually like a disgraced MI6 agent who is trying to get back in the good graces of MI6 by being an embedded agent within the syndicate to try. Take it from there, Matt.
So basically he finds out, and so they go to visit her. Mm-hmm. And she's like in the pool and she's trying to hold her breath, because basically she's learned that kind of like the key to what they need is kind of cellared in this underwater apparatus. And the only way you could get down there is, I think it's like 4 minutes or something. You have to do this whole thing, which then leads to this really great like car and motorcycle chase. And then eventually sort of Tom Cruise has to go to the apparatus. But yeah, it's almost, Ilsa is almost a mirror character to Ethan in this movie, to where it's like they're both sort of disgraced. Right. And then they're sort of just dragging poor Benji along.
It was a real breath of fresh air to have Kathleen Ferguson in this film. Is it Catherine Ferguson? I guess
Rebecca Ferguson.
Oh, Rebecca Ferguson.
Yeah.
Who am I thinking of? Anyway, sorry about that, Miss Ferguson. Rebecca Ferguson was really great to have her in this movie as a breath of fresh air. Because she was just an interesting character and very, just a very cool, competent spy movie character. They had the big stunt with not just the airplane, but apparently Tom Cruise did learn how to hold his breath for 6 minutes underwater to do some of the underwater sequences in that computer core location. And then we get to the point where this is actually you can see the reflection in the plexi above Tom Cruise's head. They capture the bad guy in like basically a plastic box. They lead him to a certain spot, and then they effectively capture him in this box. And and then at that point, they've got the guy from the syndicate, and now they have to figure out, I don't know what to do next. I found this movie to be we missed one big part. We missed one major part. Sorry about this, everybody. These movies are confusing, okay? This plot twist occurs where Simon Pegg's character of Benji is kidnapped by the main bad guy. And he then tells Ilsa, who is still, he thinks, under his employ, right?
Mhm.
Tells her, take Simon Pegg. We're going to strap this bomb to him. We're going to go to an outdoor cafe, and then you tell Tom Cruise to meet you there. And when we do, because what they want in this movie, he wants this encrypted flash drive that has bank account codes stored with millions of dollars. It totals up to like something like almost $3 billion in all these different bank accounts. When you add it all up, it would be $3 billion, but it's all spread out all over the place.
Yeah.
And apparently it was money that was seeded into these bank accounts by the IMF or MI6, or it was MI6. MI6 did it because they thought there was going to be this syndicate operation, but then it went south because they were going to pay known Interpol level criminals to do their dirty work for them in rogue nations. They were going to pay them to do all this underhanded stuff, and they were going to use that money to activate them so that they would be completely self-sufficient and it would never be traced back to the British government.
Yeah.
And this guy wants it because he needs that money to start his syndicate, which the MI6 has backed off of because they realize they wouldn't have been able to control it, and it would have been really bad for the world because this guy wants to overthrow everything. He wants the whole establishment world order upended. So they strap a bomb to Simon Pegg, and they put like a 6 or 8 minute timer on it. They go to this outdoor cafe. Ilsa is there guarding Simon Pegg so that he doesn't run or whatever. Not they can blow him up, whatever. Tom Cruise is told to show up. He shows up, and they're like, you give us that flash drive in the next 6 minutes, or your friend dies. Now, I have been increasingly distracted in these movies because they gave Simon Pegg the nickname Benji. And I always think of a shaggy little dog when someone says the name Benji. So that really throws me off.
But I just think of Howard Stern personally.
They're
Benji.
that neither here nor there. I know that's my own personal problem. But this was the moment when I realized, okay, these films have turned a corner and can't go back from them, because this guy is a legitimately sinister villain. I would say he's probably the best villain in the series since Philip Seymour Hoffman as far as his effectiveness.
Yeah.
However, his sinister nature is, give me the flash drive or your friend is blowed up along with you and everybody sitting at the cafe who doesn't realize that they're about to be collateral damage.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise is like, well, there's just one problem, because I destroyed the flash drive. And then this happens.
Where is the disc?
You're looking at it. I am the disc. I memorized it. All 2.4 billion in numbered accounts. Right now you're thinking it's bluff. I couldn't possibly memorize the entire disc.
So now Tom Cruise is like, he's not just a trained, competent operative like he was at the start of this movie series. He's not even a trig strategist when it comes to coming up with, studying people's behavior and then coming up with these elaborate plans. Now he is truly like a photographic memory meta mind guy with the chops of Batman or whatever, where he can just photographic memory learn all these different account routing codes to at least 25 or 50 different bank accounts, and he knows exactly which ones are going to route to which this. And at that point, as much as I wasn't hating the movie, I was kind of like, we have really gone far afield from where this whole thing began. Like, yeah. What did you think of this movie? Like,
I think this is one of those times to where when you watch a movie on its own, it's fine. But when you do these sort of marathons, you start to kind of see kind of how crazy everything is, especially watching this after Ghost Protocol and before Fallout, which I think Fallout is a little bit more straightforward. It's not bad, but I think it does go back to what we're saying about Ethan Hunt, which is this sort of like transformation into basically super spy. It's not nearly as fun. Like, it's fine, but like it's just one of those things to where it's just like it's more plot armor. It's like, well, now he's not going to kill anyone because he'll lose all the bank account stuff, and it's like, okay.
Now, people are saying that it was a bluff and that they say so. I don't recall that line. I don't doubt you guys, but I didn't catch that.
I gotta be honest, guys. I watched a lot of movies recently. So my brain, to quote Matt Mikkelsen from Rogue One, it doesn't work like it used to. So you might be right.
I mean,
I might be wrong. But if you are right, the movie didn't stick well enough in me and Michael's heads, and that is partially our fault.
I thought Rebecca Ferguson was the best new part of this, and I was really
glad I think she was a really good addition to the series.
Yeah. But the series really does at this point follow the formula of, you know, stunt chase, stunt, you know, standoff. It's gotten to that level. Now we are at the second to last film at this point in this impromptu off the cuff chat of ours tonight. So we are now looking at Fallout, which to date is now officially, not adjusted for inflation, the most successful Mission Impossible film of all time. So this is the poster for Fallout. What did you see this in the theater?
No, I didn't.
Okay, me neither. Yeah. Okay, what did you think of this movie?
I really enjoyed this one. I think this movie kind of took some of the issues I had with the last two, and I think really cemented itself. Obviously, it's not going to be like the first movie. It's far more concerned about being an action series. But you know what? Fine. I think this movie has a good villain with John Locke, aka Henry Cavill. Who I think they really do a good job of presenting a mental and physical equal to Ethan Hunt, which I think is really important in these movies. They bring back Rebecca Ferguson. They bring back Michelle Monaghan in a very creative way. Ving Rhames. And I think just everybody is firing on all cylinders. And whilst many of the action scenes are, let's just do something cool, it's more so like the helicopter stuff or anything. It's more driven by the plot or that bathroom fight. It's far more plot driven, which I always enjoy in action movies when it can be a plot driven thing. And also some of them feel smaller, like that bathroom fight. It's not very big, but it works really well. And again, going back to the Langley heist, like smaller, more concise action scenes, you know, they work better.
Yeah, and
there's also that Henry Cavill just does that. It's the coolest thing in the world.
and this movie also starts to tie back to other things in a more plausible way. If you remember, there's that moment in Mission Impossible 3 where out of nowhere for 3 seconds, the big blonde dude that worked with Max is standing on a boat and hands Tom Cruise the mask to pull over his head that he had to wear to meet Max in the original movie. And he was her henchman in the original film, but he has no lines, doesn't say anything, and they just share a smile, and he puts the mask on. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's about to meet Max. And then they pull the mask off. He's totally not with Max. He's with this rando, you know, that his British friend or whatever is trying to you know, help him get in contact with. This movie introduces Max's, I assume, daughter.
Yeah, Vanessa Kirby.
And Tom Cruise is pretending to be a guy named Lark. So she at first, even though she's also very trig and very, very, you know, she's very, very smart, she takes him at face value at first with a little suspicion that he is John Lark, because they accidentally, or they think they accidentally killed John Lark, the guy on they think the guy on the left is John Lark, and they think they killed him in the bathroom by accident. So then Tom Cruise is just like, well, we can't even make a mask on him because when Ilsa showed up and saved us, she shot him in the face. So we have no face left.
Well, and also Henry Cavill destroyed the machine when he just bashed against the
Right.
head of who they fought. And so basically they're like, we just have to hope that she's never actually met him face to face, which she hasn't. And so Tom Cruise is able to sort of go. And then also just sort of leads into that sort of cool thing of just like, how far is Ethan going to have to go with this? They have that sort of like dream sequence of him killing the cops.
Right.
And it feels... there's just something about this one that the other two didn't have, and that's why I think this is the best one, even including Dead Reckoning, the best one since the first movie. Everything just feels real, and I think at least for me, I can't speak for Michael, I think they pulled back that, like, Ethan is the greatest thing ever, because, like, Ethan gets his ass kicked in that bathroom fight. He gets his ass kicked by Henry Cavill, but that's good. That's good, and that's why I like it. I like that you think maybe he's not going to get, the device at the very last second. And again, bring back Michelle Monaghan. I thought that was such an ingenious thing to sort of push forward sort of Ethan's story of sort of like going back to this character that we kind of thought we left off with in 4, that like, oh, they got divorced and she started a whole new life, but now just sort of for just completely accidental. Now they're back together, and and her and Ving Rhames have that great moment where she's like, so how is he? He's like, oh, Ethan's just Ethan.
This is the one that I think, thanks to the title and the events, I feel like I can remember the crux of the plot of this movie better than a lot of the others. It's them having to stop the guy from the syndicate after he escapes from setting off these nuclear devices. And tracking him down.
Yeah, it's also the first movie that is like kind of a direct sequel to the last one.
Right.
They bring him back, which is great, which is,
there is a little bit in this movie of that Ethan Hunt metamind thing where you think that Alec Baldwin's character, who reestablished the IMF at the end of Rogue Nation, you think that he says, I trust you and all this kind of stuff. And then of course something happens and he immediately is mad and doesn't trust him.
Yeah.
But then you find out that also might've all been a planned ruse to
basically, and we don't really find out the moment, but basically Ethan learns that Henry Cavill is the John Locke they've been looking for. And they kind of set him up, including Alec Baldwin, who sadly they kill off in a sequence that is really good. But again, Alec Baldwin is just an incredible actor, and but it's a great sequence, and it feels real. And I also do love that moment where Henry Cavill realizes that they got him and he pulls the mask off, and it's Simon Pegg. Like, it's all really good, and you get a great foot chase, which of course famously Tom Cruise broke his ankle doing and kept on running,
jumping across the building.
And again, and what I like about that, going back to sort of they pull back Ethan, there's that moment where he throws the chair out the window, breaks, and he starts standing, and Benji's in his ear just like, go. He's like, I'm gonna need a second here, which I think like the Ethan in the last movie would have just kept on running. And it's nice to pull back the character, which I think these last two movies, Fallout and Dead Reckoning, have done. And obviously you're not going to get past the Ethan we got in the first movie, but obviously you shouldn't. But I think comparatively to the one we had in 2, 3, 4, and 5, I much prefer the progression of the Ethan. It feels more direct, a line from who he was in the first movie as sort of the new field agent to sort of a more experienced one.
Right.
But he still feels kind of fallible. And that's good.
In this movie, yes. The Ghost Protocol film and Rogue Nation, they kind of jumped the Ethan is super, super brilliant all the time thing. This movie and a little bit of Dead Reckoning have some of that in there, but not to the level that we just saw in the clip from Rogue Nation or now this film, I'm trying to remember. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. We almost didn't talk about the big stunt.
Oh, yeah.
The helicopter sequence in this, I didn't see this in the theater. I didn't see it on an IMAX screen, and I'm not even afraid of heights. But when that helicopter took off and he was hanging from that cargo bundle, and then he slipped on the rope and then had to climb up again and everything, I was actually, my toes were curling up. Like, I was like, this is a very effectively done stunt sequence.
Yeah, it's really well done. And they even get that great moment between Benji and Elsa where it's like, what the hell is he doing? It's like, I find it best not to look.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really well done, and again, and there's also that if you pay attention to these things, there's a level of like that is actually Tom Cruise doing all that, which just like that's important sometimes. In you know, if you can capture the reality of it, it feels better than a stuntman who just had Tom Cruise's face green screened onto him.
Right. Exactly. It's it's nice to see real stunts, you know, in a movie.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see real stunts in a movie. When I saw this sequence, I kind of felt like, okay, this is the first time in a long time. When I say long time, I've been watching the films like every day for like 6 days at that point. I was like, you know what? For some reason, and I don't know why, for some reason, him climbing that tower in Ghost Protocol, it didn't. Maybe because the tower is so futuristic looking, and it almost, you would almost assume that it, even though you know it's not, your brain still goes, yeah, but that looks like the kind of thing they would make into a special effect. Like,
and the fact that he's using like technology that doesn't really exist in our world with the gloves and everything.
Right.
There's those things you add that sort of just take you out. Whereas here, it's like it's a rope and a helicopter.
Right.
They're real.
Yeah, it's very real. I thought it was also really interesting in this that he split the team up so that they were doing, they both had like very important things they had to do.
Yeah.
But his task to get that thing back also involved the chase, while the other characters were still doing action things. They were still fighting people. They were still trying to, you know, literally diffuse bombs and stuff. So they weren't just sitting around like guys in chairs hitting keyboards. They were actually doing stuff in that ending scene. And I really liked that. Yeah,
because you have that whole Benji's literally being hung as Ilsa has to sort of have the fisticuffs and sort of at the last moment kick the chair under Benji's feet.
Yep.
And then Luther and Juliet, they're not really having that, but that's because they're sort of way more as the two people have known Ethan the longest. Their story is way more about sort of like connecting, you know, the stuff that happened in the intervening years sort of back to Ethan with how like she was this very important person to Ethan, and you know,
right.
And that's great too.
It was great. It was weird to see Wes Bentley in an almost totally uncredited role, which I was like, whoa, Wes Bentley. Yeah. But it was nice to see her again, even though I'm still fundamentally opposed to them ever having married Ethan off anyway. Like, you know, this sequence also unexpectedly gave me my favorite post Mission Impossible 1 bit of dialogue of all time. It caught me off guard. Like it's when they're chasing each other in the helicopters, and Cavill pulls out that what looks like a 50 cal or a saw or something like that, and he just starts shooting it at Ethan, and Ethan has just kind of gotten himself in the pilot seat, and he's figuring out how to fly the helicopter, and he's trying to, you know, and he tries to do this one maneuver, I can't remember, and he gets a bunch of lead thrown at him, and he veers away, and he just kind of offhandedly looks off back at Cavill, and he's like, prick. Like, and I just, that, I mean, it was a really great delivery. I was feeling it the moment he said it. Like, but right before he said it, I was like, God, that guy's a prick. And then he's like, a prick. And I'm like, okay, I had fun with that bit, you know.
Cavill was a really great addition, I think, to the series. And like I said, I mean, because they really crafted the character that was mentally and physically,
right.
You know, that's why that last scene works so well. Unlike, say, the Mission Impossible 2 ending, to where it's or better is probably Mission Impossible 3, to where it's like, Ethan Hunt did Philip Seymour Hoffman fight. Obviously, Ethan's going to kick his ass.
Yep.
Here, you're like, I don't know. Henry Cavill's Superman. He's a big dude.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is 5'7".
Yeah. I was a little like, oh wow, they really are gonna just kind of let us.
And they mess Cavill up. His whole face after
did.
the crash, like it is really great makeup.
Oh yeah, it was
Like,
really good
really,
makeup.
It's really well done.
I was actually shocked though that they left it to our imagination how he managed to get the thing and pull the thing out at the last second. They didn't show it. They were just like, he did it. Don't worry. Da 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 da. Which wasn't done badly. I just didn't expect them to use that sleight of hand for that. You know.
Yeah, but it's fine, and it almost it makes the sequence a little bit more fun because you're with the other character, with the other four characters of just like, you know, we all know on one we have to cut, and we just kind of have to hope to God that Ethan's pulled it.
Right. And that helicopter sequence, you know, we've come as, and I'm not taking anything away from anything that was in the first film stunt wise, because I think it was all very effective. But if you consider, like, this was a dangerous stunt, but it was a very focused stunt, and it was literally very grounded. This stunt required a lot of core strength, and it was very refined and very, very cool to see. But also, it was very restrained. And then suddenly, by this movie, we've got him hanging off of, you know, moving helicopters at speed. These films have come a long way in that department.
Yeah. And that's a testament to, I think, Tom Cruise and his production company of just like, you know, learning so much more in sort of the intervening like 20 years between, you know, the first movie and this one. And also just like the bigger success the series has become, the more willing I think Paramount and the other people are just like, Tom kind of knows what he's doing, so just let him hang off. Let your main star hang off a helicopter. And if he dies, to quote Les Grossman for Tropic Thunder, we will mourn for him in the presses, but then way down the line, we will file a tax return, preferably before the end of the fiscal year.
Oh, they'll come in by the date. You know,
I still believe there's this movie Tom wants to make of like a family in space. I think that's how he's going to die. Is he's going to go into space, and that will be it.
Well,
that's how I think he wants to go out. Is his name to be in memoriam in a film?
Well, if I'll tell you this, if he commits to doing that movie and he trusts Musk rockets to get him up there, he's a dead man.
You think he's using Musk rockets? Tom Cruise is going to build his own rocket himself.
I call it the cruise missile. It's my rocket into space. All right. Well, we are now at the point where we have to make a decision. Do we risk the people who haven't been paying attention to the stream disclaimer? Do we risk talking about 7 in its entirety, or do we simply touch on our thoughts about 7 overall and then end the stream?
You are my Jim Phelps, sir, so I will let you make the call.
So
I'm nearly Emilio Estevez.
So that means I betrayed you. I'm going to murder you.
That's what I'm trying to say, Michael.
Okay. Let's see what. Okay, so burn it down, spoil all the things is what Jason Anderson says.
Well, of course, Jason Anderson said that.
Yeah,
he just likes chaos sometimes.
And then Keith Holmesley says yes, because Keith Holmesley is a Tom Cruise addict. All right, all right, everybody, we're going to talk about 7, and we're read it right there, and we spoiler wimps go away. We're talking.
Ethan Hunt dies. No, not really.
I had no idea that Kittredge was Ethan's father. So here we go. Here is the poster for Mission Impossible 7, Dead Reckoning. I am seeing a lot of characters on this poster now. Like it is. Okay, first things first. Let's talk about, because the plot is easy to remember on this one, like Fallout. Fallout was nuclear devices.
Yeah.
Called Fallout. This one's about an AI. An AI that has escaped its parameters, and it's a threat to global stability. It's really
Skynet, basically.
Yes, it's Skynet.
Which, just given all this stuff with the strikes and everything, you're like, Tom Cruise knew something 2 years ago when they started making this that the rest of us just found out about. Because this movie is a little bit too relevant with its whole AI thing.
It's that Tom Cruise genius, right?
Tell me, Tom Cruise! Use a witchcraft on me to get the fire off me!
Yes, it is, Michael. Michael brings that up, and he thinks that I'm going to sit here and be like, huh, silly Tom Cruise. But no, look, Tom Cruise knows things. Okay. Look at my hair. Okay. That is Mission Impossible 2 Tom Cruise era. Okay.
Yeah.
To be honest, I did once bring a picture of Tom Cruise from, I think it was 3 when I was like in middle school, and I was like, yeah, do that. It's a true story.
I've done it too. I've brought hairstylist pictures of Nathan Fillion from Firefly, and I've brought pictures of Harrison Ford from Raiders and stuff, and said I need my hair like that.
That was just last week, folks.
Yeah, I did a hair. I brought them a picture of Harrison Ford from Empire like 15 years ago, so that I could get that hairstyle going for Dragon Con. Okay, so we're now in Dead Reckoning. We now have a reckoning with Dead Reckoning. So the AI plot is the overarching thing, but Matt and I need to unpack the elephant in the room, which is they have decided in this movie to retcon Ethan Hunt's backstory.
Yes.
And I thought this was not only superfluous, I thought it broke a lot of the previous movies in doing so. What did you think? First, tell us what the new backstory is, and then tell us what you thought.
I think for some people, you need to remind them. So the old backstory is basically Ethan Hunt was this farm kid who was really smart, and he joined the military. He was in there for, I think, like 5 years or something, and he gets out, and he goes to join the CIA, and the CIA basically during the screening is just like, there's another quieter thing that we think you should do, and that's how he ends up joining the IMF. In this one, however, there's some woman that we don't really get to know that Ethan was involved with who gets killed, and I'm assuming Ethan must get blamed for that, and basically he's given a choice between joining the IMF or going to jail, which is basically what Harvey Keitel describes to Sylvester Stallone joining IA in Copland. He's like, Freddie, they catch you on the take, and they tell him you can either join them or go to jail. It's basically the same thing. Yep. And I'm not, for as much as I like this movie, I'm not a fan of that. And the next movie has to do a really good job of explaining why this is the way it is.
Yeah, it undercuts everything that makes the tension in a lot of the other movies work. And I know I sound like I'm grinding my axe here, but it's particularly damaging to the first movie, because when Ethan faces off against Kittredge in the first film, right after his team has been wiped out, all of that tension comes from the fact that Ethan is just as bewildered as the audience as to what happened, how it happened, why could he not prevent it, and why are they pointing the finger at him that he's the murderer when he's not. He's one of the best agents in the IMF. There's no reason for them to suspect this should be the case. That's part of how the audience, how the viewer buys into the tension of the entire film. If we know in the background, one, that he actually was a wanted man that was a criminal of some kind before he joined the IMF, it's no longer outside the realm of possibility that he would have sold out to somebody like Max and would have killed his whole team to get a knock list.
Yeah.
And then you have to ask the question, because Kittredge is back in this movie. Here's Kittredge and Ethan from the movie right here. Kittredge is back, and I was so glad that he was at first, because I want that continuity with the original film that this series has desperately needed, because Kittredge was always the best IMF secretary contact.
Yeah.
But if Kittredge was the one that made the deal with him to keep him out of prison and forced him to be an IMF agent, why would Kittredge have never brought that up in the restaurant in Mission Impossible?
And also, there's the whole thing with the Jim Phelps thing, to where it's like, why would you have to frame his aunt, his mom and uncle with the, like,
right?
All you need to do is just be like, he's a criminal,
right?
Could be prone to do it again, and
right.
It right off the bat, you're just like, it's a unfortunate retconning to shorthand a relationship between your hero and villain of the movie.
And that's another good point. Why does the hero have to have a close relationship to this villain? They've never needed it before.
Tension. Well, they had it in the first movie, but there it felt this was the guy who trained Ethan. You know,
but he didn't know he was the villain until near the very
he didn't
end.
know. But again, there you understand because there is a tension between, like, you know, the master, the apprentice. You know, whereas here it's just it's to shorthand Gabriel into making it way more emotional for Ethan when all he had to do, and as they establish in this movie, is just threaten his friends' lives. That's enough.
Right.
I honestly think it is for that. And I know we've been doing this the whole stream, but really jumping around, I really think it's for that moment that Luther and Ethan have going into the final act with the train, which is like the AI is thinking you're going to kill Gabriel. Right. And the only way that makes sense is to have this previous, you know, relationship to where Gabriel killed this one woman and now he's killed Ilsa. And so now it's like, you know, 2 strikes, and now Ethan's really jazzed to murder this guy.
Right.
I'm sorry, Gabriel is.
There were things about this movie that really worked, and I liked that Kittredge was back.
Yeah, me too.
And I really loved the first 2 major sequences with Haley Atwell's character Grace. I love because it lightened up the movie in a way that a lot of the other movies have never had. I don't mean lightened it up like to a level where it was a comedy, but it gave it a little bit of fish out of water kind of comedy, and you know, these 2 people who are already like lightly adversarial now having to work together because they're handcuffed together in this crazy place.
I mean, it's kind of, again, going back to movies, it's basically that scene from Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah, you know, with Pierce Brosnan. I think she was a great addition, and I think this movie is certainly being made. This is not supposed to be your first Mission Impossible movie, so you're almost supposed to be with Ethan Hunt, with Ilsa, with all these characters who have been in MI6 and all this, and so we get to sort of have fun watching Grace, who is her own sort of, you know, has her own sort of background, but she's getting pulled into this world. And I think it's done really well. And she plays it very well, as, you know,
she does.
Also, just talking about James Bond, I have to feel like the little yellow car was a reference to For Your Eyes Only.
Oh, yeah. I thought
it's too close. And I thought that since the trailer, I'm like, this has to be a reference.
Yeah. I think
it's a great sequence. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was a little bit of a nod there to that for sure. And
that is really funny too, when, you know, you see like this super like slick car and then this little just Fiat. It's like, okay,
which actually makes more sense for a spy to have a car like that than the fancy car.
Yeah.
In reality, the plot of this film trying to stay one step ahead of the AI, and then this Gabriel guy, which I did, as much as I understand based on what you've described and remembering Ving Rhames' lines about don't kill him, whatever you do, don't kill him because the AI is counting on it. And if you do, the AI wins. I understand, but I still think it's a hackneyed writing. There were other ways I think they could have established that without having to retcon Ethan's background in order to make that work. And
and Gabriel is a villain. I think he's just okay, but it's like he is going back to that, like he is working on behalf of this AI. And there's also things to where like he just doesn't, again, and coming off of Henry Cavill, he doesn't feel physically on par. Like that fight scene he has with Ilsa, it doesn't feel like he should win. Right. Like it doesn't feel like it. It feels like, well, she's got to die, and so Gabriel and again, I don't know if that's an acting thing. I don't know if that's a writing thing. I'm not really sure. All I know is that it doesn't work the way he doesn't work as a villain the way the movie wants me to feel about him.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt like he was something that in the writer's room, they thought they had a really, really cool idea. But it's the kind of thing that modern Hollywood writers think is a great character, whereas they're out of touch with the audience. And I was sitting back just thinking to myself, this guy's interchangeable with just any other nothing bad guy.
Yeah, it's that thing to where like the real villain is the AI, but when you have this faceless, voiceless entity, you need to have a face and a body for Ethan to go after. So here's this guy.
Yeah, and
that can work in some ways. It works in Tron beautifully.
Right.
You know, where they have he has a face, but the sort of autonomous villain that you can't fight, and then you have the actual force you can fight. But here, it does not work.
And this whole dynamic, you know, Grace is kind of like Tandy Newton was in MI2. She's a professional.
Yeah. When you were describing, because I haven't watched MI2 in a bit, I was like, that's Grace.
Yeah. Now, fun fact, everyone, in MI2, Tandy Newton's name is Naya, and it's spelled Nyah. If you look up Skeletor memes online, you will see that they spell the same way in many of the voice bubbles. Anyway,
I'm sure that's what Tom Cruise was thinking of, Michael.
But what I was disappointed by with this was I was enjoying the opening bits with her and him at the airport, and then her and him in the chase so much that when I was thinking, oh, we're getting a tonal breath of fresh air with this Mission Impossible movie, but then really quickly they pivoted right back to telegraphed, maudlin, very serious, very up its own rear end drama on a level where, you know, in the original film, the tension came from not knowing who was going to live or die very quickly. It was like, oh, everybody's expendable in this film. And not knowing what was going to happen next. You really did not know. All the tension in the computer room. Is he going to get caught? Like the way they frame everything. This movie, we kind of knew, okay, Rebecca Ferguson's Ilsa, she's about to die, because he literally comes in and prophesizes it to Tom
he basically
Cruise.
says the AI has figured that one of them is going to die.
Yeah,
you
there's
have to
nothing you
choose
can
which
do
one.
about it. And it's like, and I think the only saving grace of that, I'm not mad about the fact that a character gets killed. I'm more mad about the fact that they've made it this very heavily telegraphed drama thing.
Me and my friend talked about this when we talked about the movie. We're really hoping that there's some way she's not actually dead, but I'm feeling like she might not. Because we're like, it's Mission Impossible, masks. But we're like, who would even be wearing the mask? We have no. Yeah. But it also does a disservice to, I think, the character of Ilsa. And then also, I was watching a video on this, and it's also this weird thing to where it's like, so the IMF team can only ever have one woman on it at a time? Okay. Like, yeah, it doesn't work the way the movie, like, I'm okay with, particularly with these last two supposedly going to be the end of this series. As someone who's been on the ride, I'm totally fine with it leaning more into the drama. I'm okay with that. I just think at the cost of losing a great character in the way, like, if Ilsa died to Henry Cavill in the last movie, I would have been more okay with that. It's just this guy. Yeah. He's just a guy.
Yeah, he's just a dude in a tweed suit with a really snotty attitude. Like, he's very arrogant, and that's about it. I felt like in that moment, because you've got Ilsa here and Grace over here, you've got Julie that just exited the series before, and all I'm thinking is this shouldn't be called Mission Impossible. This should be called Dating Impossible, because all this is about is, at this point in this series, is all of Ethan's complex, and not to mention Max's daughter, who's sort of macking on him. You've got all these women in this movie who are all revolving around Tom Cruise, and I'm like, this just feels like it's just all of Tom Cruise's drama trying to juggle all these women.
Now, Michael, you really think a man who's had like 3 wives would have drama?
I'm just saying that for a movie called series.
Watch Grace's real name be revealed to be Nicole in the next one.
Well, for a movie series called Mission Impossible, there's very little mission left. It seems like these movies are increasingly distracted by Ethan Hunt's love life. And I would like us to get back to the mission, because,
I think particularly of how this movie ends is basically the whole thing is the key is actually a key. And now they're setting up that like there's this submarine that we see at the beginning of the movie that the AI has sort of basically there was this sort of thing in this submarine to sort of make it, this super, hunt for October things. But it sort of, as with all AI, it learned and it got smarter and it outsmarted the humans because AI will always do it. Hence why it stopped making AI smarter, people. And so now it's like the only way we have to get the source code that can only be found in this. So I do feel like the next one will be very much like, we got to get to the submarine. Gabriel now knows that he doesn't have the key, and he probably knows that Ethan knows about the submarine, where to go. So now it's sort of the two parties kind of conversion on the one thing. And then you have Luther working on his own to sort of try to find sort of, along with that, how to destroy this. And will they do it? If I would say yes. But you know what? James Bond also always figures it out, so that's not really a problem for me.
It's Gabriel gets away with both parts. No, he doesn't get away with the key because
he doesn't. He thinks he does, and then it's because that was the sleight of hand. I really loved how they brought that back from the first movie. How Ethan and Grace both sort of had that sort of like magic sleight of hand that I have no idea how it's done. I wish I did, because that'd just be cool to screw with people.
Well, you can. I think there's ways to learn it. You just
it's called YouTube. I know, but
the stunts in the film are just as, hair raising as the last one in many ways.
And look, as someone who loves movies and filmmaking, watching the behind the scenes stuff and hearing, Christopher McQuarrie talk about the fact that they're like, there was no train we could crash, so we just had to build the train. And they did. And like they talk about how like they had to design every car. And what I felt was so great was when Grace is trying to stop the train, they're setting up all the problems that her and Aoife are going to run into, but you don't pick up on it until you're like, oh wait, there's the kitchen, there's the piano, like and again, that kitchen card is really good, and sort of that ticking clock of like every cart's falling, so we can't dilly dally. It's really well done, and I thought it was a great way to sort of end it, and I also think sort of with Grace, sort of her whole story is she's kind of just on her own, and now there's that kind of like, now she's a part of the IMF, and that whole thing with Kittredge, which I also really like the two sort of just random army guys going after just sort of, there's that great moment to where they see Director Kittredge and it's like, I'm not here, and then at the end when they're sort of forcing everybody to the back of the train, it's like, well sir, considering you're not here, it shouldn't really concern you.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoyed Kittredge being back. I'm still a little hung up on retconning Ethan's backstory.
Me too. I like I said, now this is a part one, so I will hold my judgment for part two, because if part two is able to come up with this great story that works, okay. If not, Also, Carrie Elways was in this.
Yeah, in a thankless role.
Yeah, but I think that's because Tom was mad at him that he overtook his racing career in Days of Thunder, so this is payback.
Oh, yeah, there's that. And then, of course, the Palm Clement, I can't pronounce.
Yeah, I can't pronounce her last name. Mantis from the Guardians of the Galaxy films.
Yeah, she was in it. I'm ambivalent towards, silent assassin characters like that. So I was kind of like, she didn't do a bad job or anything.
No, she was actually, and honestly, as someone who only knows her as Mantis, whoa, night and day.
Right.
Mantis is so this wide-eyed, almost child in Guardians 2 and 3 to have this like murderous, And again, going back to smaller scale, I did really like that alley fight where it's Tom and her and just sort of fights. I'm like, that's just a great setup that it's like, we've locked the doors. There's two of us and one of you. How are you going to get out?
It was a far better and more engaging fight than what was going on the bridge. I thought.
Yeah, me too. Because and again, that goes back to just Gabriel lacking as a villain. It just it didn't feel it like that fight felt like that fight felt like
Right.
Ethan's in trouble, and also just like moments where like Ethan doesn't even really care about the fight. Like he's just trying to climb over the gate, but they sort of literally pull him back in. And I did think that's set up to where it's like, because the whole thing is this AI just knows everything. Once she lives, it sort of is like she's going to betray you because he let her live, and that does make sense because she does exactly what the AI said, because she does tell him about the submarine.
Right. I would say that AI being the villain had the effect on the movie that produced, for me, it's the best scene in the series post MI1. And that was the moment where really my phone's going to ring in the middle of my stream. Hold on, let me turn that off. Sorry. That's embarrassing. Sorry about that.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, I can't believe that phone was still on and way over there. Sorry about that, everyone. The thing that I will thing that I'll see, now I'm thrown off. Thing that I'll say about the AI plot is that there's that moment where Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, I think Grace is there as well, and they start to, I can't remember if Ilsa's still alive at that point. I think she is.
Start describing the scene, I'll know for certain.
I think it's right before they.
If it's the scene before the train,
no, then she wouldn't be. But it's
yeah.
I think it might be the scene before the train, but I want to say it might be the scene before the Venice thing. But anyway, it's not important who's in the room.
Yeah.
What's important is where he starts doing that post Ghost Protocol, Ethan Hunt, Trig Mind stuff. Yeah. And he's telling all of them, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg just look at him and they're like, none of that is going to work anymore, dude. Like, this AI is smarter than you. It has run all the permutations a billion ways from Sunday. It knows all the most likely probabilities of things you're going to do, and then what you'll do 7 steps after those probabilities. You cannot do your normal Ethan Hunt.
Yeah, Ving Rhames, I think, even has a line to the effect of, like, you can't outsmart this one.
Right.
Like, there is no thinking 15 steps ahead. Yeah. Because it's already done that and then some.
Right.
Yeah. I think Ilsa's dead by that point. But that also leads into, I love the moment to where they're explaining all the masks and all this. And then it just cuts back to Haley Atwell, who's just like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because like, she didn't know any of this. We all know it because we watch these movies. But yeah, you were to tell me, like, so you're just going to put this mask on, everything's going to be fine. I do have to ask, Michael, how did you feel about the sort of big stunt of this movie with the motorcycle off the cliff leading into more of a sort of just like out of nowhere humorous moment? Because personally, it's a little dumb, but I enjoyed it quite thoroughly.
I'm trying to remember what the humorous moment.
So the whole thing is that it's been revealed that Grace was impersonating Vanessa Kirby.
Right.
They've pinned her down. Ethan wasn't able to get on the train like he thought. He had to jump off a parachute, and he just comes literally crashing through and knocks out the villains.
Oh, okay. Yeah. When you said humorous moment, I was thinking, like, did he say a line like in Fallout where he's like, prick, you know?
No, I meant him just crashing through out of nowhere.
I thought the timing of that was very...
It worked for me. I laughed, but I saw the movie yesterday for the second time. I still laughed.
It's very cinematic, and it's one of those moments that action films can only get away with, especially in an action franchise. You can only get away with that kind of stuff once every like 4 movies, you know? If they do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would work in the next one, but for this one, I was like, you know what? And then also it's really funny when the other guy goes to get up and the wind just pulls him back and knocks into him. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a very well executed scene, very, very good stunt work and effects work. I was fine with it in the moment. I didn't like get pulled out of the film or anything.
Yeah.
Take note of, well, that was very, very convenient timing that he came through that window right as she was about to be left, you know. But again, you know, that's the narrow escape that happens in pulp adventure a lot. Like there's other films where they do that, and it's okay if you do it to a level of moderation.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you feeling about the possibilities presented for Dead Reckoning 2? I know it's delayed because of the strike.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or, well, let me rephrase that. Fortunately, because pay your writers and actors properly. Unfortunately, just because I like this movie, I really want to see the follow-up.
Sure. Now, is it
Um,
supposed to be the last one, or is are we
so this is the weird thing.
Uh-huh.
These two movies have
Mhm.
kind of been made out to be this is the end of the franchise.
Mhm.
But then when Tom Cruise was doing press for this movie, he talked about Harrison Ford doing Indiana Jones into his 80s, and he was like, I would love to do it. So now we're like, I think this is the end, and I think they're building to something really cool. I think this movie did a really good job of building off of Fallout, despite the fact of how it retcons the first movie. I think they're building to something really good. And someone who's followed the series for a long time,
Mhm.
you know, I like Haley Atwell. I think she's a great new addition. I'm really interested to see where we pick up with her character in the next movie.
Right.
And I like Gabriel kind of sucked, but the entity I like, and I like the fact that it forces Tom Cruise into like you can't be all knowing because that is all knowing. Basically, you have to think left, go right, but also go backwards, and I think that's really cool. And yeah, this was just honestly at the end of the day, this was just a good time at the movies. And I said this when I wrote my review on Facebook and Twitter. I said something else I appreciate is this movie maintains a sense of epicness in its filmmaking that many other movies lack. Like Dial of Destiny lacked.
Yep. Oh,
this
yeah.
movie has it. And I just, as a fan of action movies, appreciate that this movie still has a scale to its storytelling and its action.
Yes, you're right. This movie makes it very clear that it's operating on a very large canvas. And, you know, you're right. Dial of Destiny, as a foil to that statement, it felt very, very small and limited, and 100%. We don't have box office numbers completed for MI7 yet, but I did take the time, everybody, to compile all of the box office receipts worldwide, adjusted for inflation to 2023 from their year of release for the Mission Impossible films. And I thought we could just end by showing you how they rated in descending order of box office returns. Mission Impossible 2 is the runaway winner. Fallout is about 20 million behind. Then Ghost Protocol, which Ghost Protocol was an odd comeback because I think people saw Mission Impossible 3 and realized it didn't suck like Mission Impossible 2. Word of mouth got around, and so when Mission Impossible 4 was announced, more people rushed back to the theater.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible 1 was a stellar, out of the gate win with 890 million adjusted. And then Rogue Nation, and it's funny that, you and I talked about Rogue Nation the way we did. Rogue Nation came in under, but I'm trying to remember if Rogue Nation, Fallout was the one that came out Fallout was before the pandemic. So
Fallout was 2018.
Yeah, these were all before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay, so Rogue Nation kind of falling a little bit. I don't know what to attribute that to.
I mean, that could be multitude of things.
Maybe it could be the fact that, like we said, Ghost Protocol isn't as good, and so fewer people went back and saw Rogue Nation.
Yeah, or you also have to look at what's happening with Dead Reckoning right now. You also have to look at what was coming out around the same time as it. If there was something bigger around that time, and that makes sense too.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Well, with that, any final words, Matt, on the Mission Impossible franchise that you'd like to impart?
I think the Mission Impossible franchise is a bit uneven at times, but as I just said with Dead Reckoning, something I appreciate is it continues to have a sense of epic scale with its filmmaking and its storytelling, and I appreciate that when many other film franchises don't want to do that, and that is a credit to Tom Cruise and the people behind him that they're willing to do that, and they're willing to sort of step up their game. I'm very excited for Dead Reckoning Part 2. And this was really fun to sort of go back for all these movies and the sort of highs and lows of all of them. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate.
I'm dying of sweat.
I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you taking the time to join tonight for almost 3 hours and talk about this with me, because I really I needed the assist and you were the man to do it. So thank you. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. And we will see you on the next video. I'm working hard on my Indiana Jones 5 review. Matt, do you have anything coming up on your channel you want to promote?
I don't really have anything that I'm ready to promote yet. But if you follow me on Take 3 Productions, I do a near weekly podcast live stream at my by 8 called Simple Tricks and Nonsense. Extremely dumb and stupid, but if you just like two friends shooting the shit about literally anything, it's the podcast for you.
And with that, everyone, I am going to end on what I think is an understated but wonderful moment from the very beginning of Mission Impossible that you've already seen. But since we talked at length about it, I'm just going to end on that, and we will see you next time. So I'm gonna end on that. Stand by.
Why was there another team
What?
of IMF agents at the embassy tonight?
I don't quite follow you.
Let's see if you can follow me around the room.